Greetings, Earthlings! Welcome to the Real Friends and Football podcast. Today we have a special guest with us. We have Anthony. Please introduce yourself before we get into the complete NFL QB tier list for 2024 and 2025 season.
All right, man. Well, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it. Last time was a lot of fun. My name's Anthony. On Instagram as underscore superho. It's just HO for all those wondering. On Twitter too, but that's mostly just dumb takes. I consider myself a broker of truth. I'm not a specialist, anything. I think I just like arguing with Blazig and proving him wrong from time to time and showing him what's up. So I enjoy the analytics. I don't do sports betting. I don't do fantasy. I just enjoy watching the sport and kind of breaking down the technical components and really seeing who's doing well and also rooting for my Texans. So thanks for having me back on, man.
Right. So, this will be a fun one. And let's get right into it. So, guys, what we're going to do is me and Anthony, we're going to go back and forth picking the quarterbacks, how the list is made. And then we will hopefully at the end try to come up with a more consensus thing. Maybe if we have to move people, we will. Let's get right into this. Right. As of currently, we have 5 tiers created. I think maybe last time we did this a year ago, I think we maybe had 6. I'm not too sure, but we had a lot more quarterbacks at that point. So the first one, this is a great one to start because I know me and you have differing opinions on this. I have Aaron Rodgers right now. Definitely, probably his last year or last couple years. I don't know if you had noticed, but the NFL gave the Jets, I think, the most primetime games this season. So that's pretty wild coming off of a guy that is coming off of an Achilles tear and that is older. So I guess that the NFL really believes that this guy is going to be healthy this whole year, and he's still at the same Aaron Rodgers that he was in the past. So that's...
Do you think that's what it is? Do you think that's what it is?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I think that the NFL knows that Aaron Rodgers is controversial for a multitude of reasons right now, and I think it's eyes and ears. And I think this is the thing: you can put them in the prime time, win or lose. If they're good or bad, Aaron Rodgers will be a hot topic. He might hate it, right? He might try to get back on Pat McAfee to shoot down the haters, but I think the thing is, good or bad, he's going to be a talking point. Hopefully he's good, right? You always want to see quarterbacks do well and teams surprise everybody, but I think it's because it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. He's going to be a talking point.
Yeah, I just think it's very interesting to have the Jets as the team because, like, you saw last year how all the primetime games were with the Jets. They're just a completely ugly team without a guy like Rodgers out there. Aaron Rodgers is near and dear to my heart. When I first grew up watching football, I was a Brett Favre fan and then started transitioning over to Aaron Rodgers, being a big fan of him. Obviously, I believe that he's regressed to some point. I don't necessarily think to your level. I still consider him as a top 10 quarterback. And this is going to be strange coming from me, but I have him in Anthony's Angels, so I'm going to put him in the tier that you might have him in. But
so I'm good with that, to be totally honest. The last year he was in Green Bay was kind of it was like kind of a messy divorce, right? Like they were on their way out. I will say this. As talented as Aaron Rodgers is, he is not great with rookie receivers and new receivers. That story just came out recently that they tried to release Nathaniel Hackett and get rid of him as offensive coordinator. But, Aaron Rodgers stood by his guy. And so you've got Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard and all these guys. Look, Garrett Wilson's a dog, right? But let's see if Aaron's Angels, how about that? Let's see if Aaron's Angels can produce this year. I have questions about that and about, how he tries to control a team. Even though he says he doesn't, there ain't no team signing Randall Cobb or Alan Lazard to those contracts unless it's Aaron's guys.
I don't even think I don't even think they're on a team right now.
And Nathaniel is right above Adam Gase for me as far as coordinators go. So, hopefully Aaron makes everybody real rich. But other than that, sorry, man.
So you got Aiden O'Connell right here. To me, I think Gardner Minshew is going to be the starter, but I don't know if we even need to go into this guy at all. But
he is last chance view. Not from a talent perspective. He's got the arm. He's got some moxie. He showed some stuff last year. The issue is I really believe Gardner Minshew is going to start. And more importantly, if he gets in right at the end of the game, at the end of the season, he'll have maybe 4 to 6 games to show what he's got. But if the Raiders aren't competing, they're either going to draft or move up and draft a quarterback, or potentially go after a guy like Dak Prescott or trade for a Kirk Cousins. Who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the big one. He is the last chance to, because it's his last chance, at least with the Raiders, to make an impact.
Yeah, I agree. I see him more as like a backup quarterback. So I have Anthony Richardson. He looked really good in his first 3 games or 6 games in the NFL. He came in pretty much as a raw talent coming out of Florida, and I'm hot on Anthony Richardson. I think in the few games that I've at least seen him play, he seems like the guy for that franchise. And obviously there might be some concerns with him, running a lot. We saw Cam Newton get beat up. We see a guy like Justin Fields get beat up a lot, right? But I don't think we can put him in the Angels just yet because we haven't seen a lot out of him. But out of the 6 games or however many that we've seen from Anthony Richardson, he has the arm. Seems like he can command an offense. He is, once again, like a young, raw talent. You got a guy like Joe Flacco that can come in, maybe help him out a little bit, give him all of his years of, in the NFL. And so, yeah, I really like the projection of what's happening with Richardson. So I'm going to put him at almost
Yeah,
franchise.
maybe some of Joe Flacco's eliteness can rub off on Anthony
Right, right.
Richardson, right? Excuse me. So I think Anthony Richardson is interesting because you're starting to see a real disparity, or microcosm of how weird the quarterback draft can be, from the standpoint of, I think Anthony Richardson's like 21, 22, right? He came out after his redshirt sophomore season, got drafted high. Unfortunately, we only saw him for a few games last year. But Michael Penix and Bo Nix are 24, right? They're older than him and they're rookies now. And so there's it's going to be an interesting kind of case study on how is more college experience better, or do you want to get to the NFL and kind of do a one and done like the NBA and come in and start developing, right? Like, I'm not saying they're different talents, right? I think Anthony Richardson, his high for me is very Josh Allen, right? I don't think he's Lamar Jackson. I think he's actually more Josh Allen, but his low is going to be, maybe like a Ryan Tannehill, and not the good Ryan Tannehill, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But we'll see, right? It's now he's got a freaking cannon, right? And he's got some weapons out there, but I think that's fair. I think he's, just because of what happened last year, where the Colts roster was, and Shane Steichen implementing his offense, he needs a year or two, or really 2 years, for them to figure out what he is.
Yeah. So you got Baker Mayfield up next.
I'm going to say almost franchise, and by that I mean
You on
he's a
behind
franchise
Richardson
guy.
or in front?
Ahead, ahead. He is Baker Mayfield for everything negative I may have said about him coming in out of college. He's really flipped the script, right? I think the year with the Panthers and the Rams were beneficial to him. Humble's not the right word. He just comes across, more driven and locked in, right? And last year with the Bucks, right, they gave him a solid contract in the 40s, right? That is good money for a quarterback of his stature, right? We're going to get down the list here to guys that are pushing that number, right? Daniel Jones, for example, who was not worth that much, but Baker is accurate. He can stay just mobile enough to keep the play alive. He checks into the right plays, it seems like, in this Bucs offense. And, him and Mike Evans have a connection. So I'm pleasantly surprised, man. He's turned out to be a really likable team guy. And, I'm excited to see what they do in the competitive NFC South this year.
Right. So I got Bo Nix next. I'm going to be honest. Like, I watched him a little bit at the Senior Bowl. I wasn't too impressed with him. Watching him through 3 practices, I would have liked to see a lot more. I did make a hot take over to you that I thought that Spencer Rattler was the best quarterback at the Senior Bowl, and so that would have placed him over him and Penix. But we'll see. Obviously, the NFL has deemed Bo Nix and Penix as top 12 quarterbacks or at least in the draft, right? Top 12 pick in the last NFL draft. I believe that him and Sean Payton is almost a perfect fit. I don't know if he has the the arm strength and stuff like that. But I feel like Sean Payton can use him as a robot that he wasn't able to do with Russell Wilson. So I'm going to put him in the Chad Pennington for now, and we'll see how it goes. But I think they definitely overdrafted him a little bit. I think they could have traded down, and it's just the way how the NFL draft works. So
I mean, you had the Raiders sitting behind them, right? So that was obviously
right.
something that probably sparked some concern. But I agree that Spencer Rattler. I don't like Spencer Rattler. Like, I do not think he's going to work. I agree that he was the better quarterback talent there,
Mhm.
but you know, it, I don't love everything about Bo Nix's game. He's more talented than the guys I'm about to mention, but everybody talks about his completion percentage, him in his system, how not robotic but on rhythm and on time he is. So were Bryce Petty, so was Graham Harrell, so were a litany of guys, right, Blaine Gabbert, that were coming out that we really thought were going to be guys, and it never panned out. Bo Nix is a coach's kid, right? I think his dad coaches high
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
football. He eats, breathes, loves the game.
Hmm.
I think you're going to find out real quick if it's. I think, what do they call it? Slow blinkers, from the standpoint of Blaine Gabbert was the guy, right, that went out there and everybody said he's great on the whiteboard. He understands the offense. That's why he was a backup for so long, and even Tom Brady, wanted him on the roster. But we're going to find out if he's a slow blinker, right? It's one thing to scheme it up and say, hey, I know my checks. It's another thing to say, hey, now I've got, Ndamukong Suh running down me and I got to get it out in 1.2 seconds, right? So that's where I'm curious to see how they take Bo Nix's accuracy and timing. How do they protect him, right? I've got questions about the line, and then also on the flip side, how Sean Payton schemes guys open for him.
So the next one is going to be Brock Purdy, and I'm glad that you have this guy because I would think I would be a little bit disrespectful. I saw the TikTok that you sent over to me, Comparing him to Aaron Rodgers or something, but
He's not, right, from a physical tools. He's not. I'm going to say almost franchise.
okay,
And
where do you want me
I
to put
say
him?
this.
That's where I would have him.
I put him ahead of Baker.
Okay,
And he, I don't think he will ever be him or a Anthony's Angels, maybe on the fringe, like end the line of Anthony's Angels, but I don't think he's dramatically better or worse than a Dak Prescott, right? As
uh-huh.
far as actual talent, ability to produce. Now, the benefit for him from him being on a seventh round contract, right? And that's a big piece. He's a guy that if he makes the Daniel Jones contract of $44, $46 million a year, fine, great, right? That is the right size ish, right, for a quarterback of his. He runs the offense. He's got some moxie, man. He gets open, but a franchise quarterback, he is not. If he starts to cross into the 52, $55 million a year territory, the 49ers are going to pay heavily for that. So I've got him up there.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this. I feel like the 49ers, if I could pick any team to be on, I think I would pick the 49ers almost like with no hesitation. And I think that Purdy's going to get like a $60 million contract, honestly. I
That's the
disagree with
problem.
it. But
Yep.
I just feel if you don't have those weapons that he has with Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, etc., Christian McCaffrey, that we're not talking about the same guy. And that kind of funnels in. I don't know if you have something to say, but I was going to say that funnels into the next guy that I have, which is going to be Bryce Young. And this is a guy to me that I was really hot on coming into the NFL draft. He plays
I
for the
remember.
he plays for the Panthers, so I'm giving him another year to turn it up. And to me, I like his pocket presence. I think he has elite skills in the pocket. And now you're finally kind of giving him some weapons. You got their coach coming from the Buccaneers, I believe, the offensive coordinator for the
Yep.
Bucks. He worked with Baker Mayfield. And so now Bryce Young, he's got a little bit more. I don't want to say he has talent, but he's got a little bit more talent. We got Jatavion Sanders coming out from UT. We got Gray coming from UT. So we got a little bit more guys coming his way. And so I'm going to put him at almost
They got
franchise.
Leggett of
Yeah, they got Xavier
South
Leggett from
Carolina
South
too.
Carolina in the
Yeah.
second round.
Yep.
And they got Deontay Johnson, so they're definitely surrounding him with a lot more weapons. I'm still going to say that they got absolutely trade wrecked from the Bears, obviously because they could have Caleb Williams right now. But it, I I think he's still. I think he's still got it. I'm not gonna say this. I'm not worried about the size. Still, he didn't seem to get injured last year. That was a huge concern for a lot of people. I'm gonna put him behind Anthony Richardson because I think if you redraft, you probably still want to take Anthony just with the talent that he had, the 6 games that he kind of showed what he could do. But I still have faith in Bryce Young.
Bryce Young's high is say a healthy Tua, right? They do a lot of the same things well,
Hmm.
right? As far as delivering the ball and all that things. On the low end, he is going to be trying to think who is the backup for the Ravens that one year that randomly made a Pro Bowl behind Lamar. Huntley,
Oh,
right?
Huntley. Yeah, yeah.
He's not the biggest, but the crappy part for Bryce Young is the Panthers are crap. David Tepper may actually now be the worst owner in the NFL, not just as far as how his behavior is, but how he's
Well, how he's
managed that
building a
team.
team. Yeah.
Yeah, hats off to him. But I think a big piece of it is Bryce Young. The team might never come together before he has a chance to prove himself, right? So I'd say almost franchise because he's up there. But when I look at Bryce Young, I'll be honest, he's not physically or doesn't show anything more than I'm seeing out of Brock Purdy, at least at the time. And that's scary to me for a team that's invested that many picks, right, into a first round quarterback. So I think that's fair, but he could very quickly go from almost franchise to last chance you.
Okay.
Right. I don't think he'll ever be a Chad Pennington. If it blows up this year, he's on last chance you.
Okay. So you got Caleb Williams.
Uh, so I'm going to be honest. He is at the top of what I would call almost franchise,
Okay.
and um, part of it is I have a hard time separating how talented I think he is and how bad the Bears have been as far as managing quarterback development. They've never had a quarterback throw for 30 touchdowns or something
Yeah,
insane like that, or
I think like
35.
3,500 passing yards or something like that.
It's insane,
Yeah.
right? This is where people are wrong. He knows how to play on time. He is accurate. This hero ball thing is a total fallacy, and it is if you're saying that, you are a casual, right? You are watching highlights, or you're not paying attention. In that offense, right? He was on time. He broke down when he didn't need to be. Now, my question is, can he be patient? I'm here. You know how I am about mental health and people expressing their emotions. I'm all here for it. Can they create a environment where he can be brought along and taught to be patient and all those things? Because you saw him really get frustrated when USC struggled last year, right? And so I think his high is actually Aaron Rodgers. I don't like the Mahomes comps. As talented as he is, I think Aaron Rodgers is the better comp, but his floor is, I'm trying to think. I'm not quite sure who his floor is. Maybe like a bad Russell Wilson in some ways, but that's the part. He could shine. I think Keenan Allen is an excellent pickup for that team, right? And they got Aduze out of Washington, but Caleb Williams is he's gonna have to stay on point, and that's it. But people are wrong if they're calling him, untalented, or he doesn't know an offense, or he plays hero ball. He
Yeah.
did when it was demanded, but beyond that, everybody needs to put a little more respect on his name. But there's a little boomer bust, but I think the boomer bust isn't talent. It's going to be, between the years.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. You know me very well to where I'm a huge Justin Fields stan, and so I kind of have that like ex-girlfriend want him to fail a little bit. But I definitely
Yeah.
am very hot on Caleb Williams. I think the Bears have no reason not to make the playoffs this year. They have a top 10 defense. They have you mentioned the receivers that they have. That they might have the best receiving corps in the NFL. Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean the Bengals are probably up there. Maybe the
Bucks are up
Dolphins,
there.
the
Bucks are up
Eagles,
there.
the Bucks, and then like that team, they're top 5 like easily, and then their defense is top 10. So he's coming in.
Um,
He's coming into a team that has everything going for him, maybe outside of the coach, but like he's got the team. And we saw the last year's #1 pick with Bryce Young. He did not have that same kind of thing. So this
no.
Bears team finally has the talent to be a very good team in the NFC, and not just now, but for years to come as well. I mean, you look back at that Panthers trade that they made, and they're getting a ton of athletes.
Yep.
So I
I
agree,
agree.
though. I think he's got all of the talent. I think it's kind of those like maybe off field issues. I get, or not really issues, but I think like kind of
It's
what
not
you were
off the
saying,
field, right? Yeah, he doesn't get on trouble off the field, right?
right?
He's none of those things, right? He's kind of an Aaron Rodgers, and I'll say this about Aaron Rodgers, right? And I know we talked about it already. There's ballers and bailers. Aaron Rodgers is a bailer, right? You put him 10 points down, he starts checking down. It something happens. It's Aaron Rodgers and the comeback doesn't exist, right? It's kind of an insane thing as far as how talented he is. I don't want to call him a stat pattern. I don't think it's what he's doing. It's he doesn't have that switch, and I'm worried with Caleb Williams. The hard part of balancing the recklessness, let's call it, of him playing, but also you know what's going to happen when you're down 15 when you go say they don't have a great year, say they go 7-9, right? Like that, or sorry, 7-10,
Right.
right? What's that going to be like? And we'll talk about this later. What I'm excited to see from Caleb Williams is the first 4 years of a quarterback. I feel like this about quarterbacks, and I feel like this about NBA players. Every year you come back from an offseason, I want you to get better at something you were bad at the year before. Go to a Tom House, go to an Akeem Olajuwon, go to someone and learn something and develop that skill. If he shows that, he's going to be super successful, right? And so that's a big piece. We'll talk about a guy later that I feel like that doesn't happen despite how talented he is. But yeah, and speaking of great wide receiver cores, Texans might have the best wide
Oh,
receiver
true,
core, man.
true. I forgot to mention them after the Stephon Diggs addition. So I got C.J. Stroud. I guess we were kind of talking last podcast. I saw the video.
What's up, brother?
It still gets comments from the video that I made that you said that the Texans should get a quarterback in this draft rather than last one.
Yep.
I will say that I'm sure you've kind of swayed away from that take that you had, because CJ Stroud had an incredible season on the Texans this year, and I like a lot what I have to see. I think with when it comes to me, I want to see a little bit more than 1 year from a quarterback. I see we can get really excited about some guys. One of the guys that this year we're going to get to him later, but Jordan Love, he's very bad, or not bad, but like like a roller coaster kind of. And so I feel everyone is just all in on Jordan Love, and I'm like, slow down, let's wait a little bit before we start announcing this guy as like a top 10 quarterback. I like what he has, obviously, but I want to see a little bit more games. And so I kind of feel the same way for Stroud, but I think he is at least like a top 10 quarterback at this point from what he's already shown. I don't know if I'm ready to say he's like a top 5 quarterback, which I think some people are. So
He's not. He's not. Let's look at history, right? I'm a huge fan of Joe Burrow. I like Jalen Hurts. Deshaun Watson was a Houston Texan. Those guys had 2-3 years stints right where they were great, but Joe Burrow can't stay healthy, and they haven't been. Jalen Hurts regressed last year. It happens, right? You have guys that have these pops. Jameis Winston had a year where it's like, oh, what's he going to be, right? Mm-hmm. So that's challenging. One thing about Stroud is I was wrong from the standpoint of, remember, I liked Stroud. I thought the Texans looked more like the Panthers. I was dead wrong about how ready the Texans were going to be.
Yeah.
Right? If we talk about Stroud, I said I didn't want him to put him in a position to be a savior. Well, I had no idea they were going to, do one of those blockbuster trades and get Will Anderson. What a freaking move, right?
Yeah. And then you got D'Amico Ryans, who proved to be an amazing coach, the defense.
Tank Dell and Bobby Slowick, Tank Dell, Bobby Slowick, Nico Collins came on. And this is what I'm going to say about Stroud and why I think you have him ranked accurately. I think CJ Stroud is to Bobby Slowick's offense what Kyle Shanahan was hoping Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be, right? Can run the offense on, stay on schedule and all those things. Mm-hmm. But when you need to, drive the ball down the field to Nico Collins, right? Now to Stephon Diggs. That's the thing. I didn't know Slowick. I didn't know his game like that. To be
More
totally
familiar
fair,
with this game.
he's going to be a head coach in the next 2 years, probably, right? If he plays his cards right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say two things. The Texans had one of the easiest schedules last year, right, as far as who they had to play. So I'm curious to see what he does in competition. I want to see what CJ Stroud does off schedule and against the blitz this year. He was solid last year. I'll say it again. CJ Stroud is to Bobby Slowick what Jimmy Garoppolo was hoping to be, right? Like that. I think that's who they thought Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be, and it just didn't pan out. CJ Stroud's a dog.
I think the Texans got definitely a franchise quarterback with Stroud. Yeah, I think we both kind of are on the same page to where it's like, all right, let's see a couple more. Deshaun Watson's actually like a perfect example of like a guy, and I'm not saying that CJ Stroud is going to be him, but it's kind of an example of a guy that had like these 3 years of like incredibleness or however many years it was, and then now like what is he? And he's coming up pretty soon as well. So Dak Prescott's going to be the next one. I'll let you have him because I don't want to be too biased, but
I am going to put him at the end of Anthony's Angels.
Okay.
He is a franchise quarterback, right? But he is, to me, that line of he is a top 12 quarterback.
Yeah.
And statistically, I know that he's in the top 3-5, gets MVP votes, all these things. He doesn't put the team over the top, right? And everybody needs a running game. Everybody needs weapons. But there's something about it. And his team likes him. He's a leader, right? He doesn't bail. It's just there's a limitation, and it's not between the ears. There's a limitation somewhere about it connecting where it doesn't always show up when it needs to. And the lows aren't low, right? It's not like who were we talking about? That's kind of a roller coaster, but
like Jordan Love, like with interceptions.
Yeah, he's not a roller coaster, right? It's just sometimes he's just not going to dig you out of that ditch, right? And so he is. I'm very curious to see what the Cowboys do because Dak is that guy that is. I know $50 million is their number right now. Dak to me is a $48, $49 million quarterback, not a 55, 60, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really narrow line, right? And I'm not trying to count people's, check people's pockets, count people's money. I hope he makes the most he can make. But there's a line of, the Cowboys have mismanaged the cap entirely. I think the only team worse maybe be the Saints, right? But he's just that tier. He's kind of in that Matt Ryan category of what I thought Matt Ryan was for a while.
Yeah. I think you said it best. I honestly maybe would have had him a tier below, but I think or at least at the top. But I agree. I think he's kind of in that, Kirk Cousins-ish area. So it's like however you feel about him. So I got Daniel Jones next. I've never been excited about Daniel Jones ever. Brian Daboll, to me, I feel he's kind of done with them. I think Daboll maybe would have drafted a quarterback if he had the chance to. Maybe get a guy like Drake May we'd be more excited about. Drake May to me is very Josh Allen-esque, so I think that fit would have been really good for the Giants. As a Cowboys fan, I am not at all scared of the New York Giants. The Giants don't move the needle for me at all. They never have. Over the past 6 years, I've never had, or since Eli left, I've never had that scaredness going into a game against the Giants. I attended last year's opening week, and we ended up smashing them like 40-3. And they don't do anything. And he doesn't have a lot of weapons to work with either. But I think he's last chance you. I'm gonna put him over Aiden O'Connell. And I think maybe even by this year, he could be a backup to a guy like Drew Lock, and he's on his way out being a Carson Wentz guy that's roaming around the league being a backup.
So let's make it very clear about what I think about Daniel Jones. He is a product of Manning fever, right? Him getting that drafted that high is the same as Adam Gase getting a job he was not cut out for. And I'll say this, Daniel Jones. Physical tools, I get it, right? We've all seen him break off for 40-yard randomly. He never comes back better at anything he stuck at the year before, right? Ball security, not great. When he's not great. Completion level, it got better when Dayball get there, but that's a Dayball scheming thing. It's not better. And so I, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, when they were bad at something, every offseason they went back and they either went to their coaches or they went to someone who specialized in something and they got better at something. One of my favorite stories is Kobe Bryant saying, I got to figure out the post. He spends time in Houston with Hakeem Olajuwon for like a month or something during the offseason, gets better at the post, learns from one of the best, came back and did something that he doesn't get it before. Daniel Jones never does that. He is as reckless as it gets, and then there's no offside. So, yeah, Daniel Jones is the last chance you.
Yeah, I also think the other thing as well is he's not like relatable at all. I saw this tweet about him that like he has zero aura, which is kind of I agree with it.
He's an NPC, dude.
Yeah,
He's an NPC.
And it's like, all right, here's a guy like Joe Burrow. Obviously, it's like a bad connection, but it's like, here's Joe Burrow. This guy like oozes aura. This guy is a guy that you want to like go on the battlefield with and like go to war with. And then you have a Daniel Jones who, like you said, he's like an NPC. He just stands there. He exists. He doesn't give any leadership or anything like that to the team.
So the fallacy there is Daniel Jones looks like a middle schooler or drew up a character on Madden. And what I think the Giants' biggest mistake is they said, oh, he's so comparable to Eli Manning in the way he behaves and dresses and does all these things. Yeah, except Eli Manning was really freaking talented coming out of Ole Miss, right?
Yeah.
Like Daniel Jones wasn't. He was. He's in that bucket of like the Mitch Trubisky's and guys who are like, I don't know how it got as high as it did, but good for him. He made his $120 million or whatever it was.
So yeah, you got Derek Carr coming up next.
Chad Pennington, and I'm going to put him behind Bo Nix.
Okay.
Derek Carr, I have a lot of love for the Carrs as a Houston fan, right? But I thought that it was a bad sign when Derek Carr couldn't make it work in Josh McDaniels' offense. Not saying Josh McDaniels is a great head coach, but that offense specifically, I thought was tailored to him. And the guy in New Orleans is similar to Sean Payton, right? Where it's short passes, timing, and Derek Carr just doesn't make wild plays, right? I believe him and Andy Dalton are drafted around the same time, and that's my comp for him. He's weirdly, him and Andy Dalton are eerily similar in that they had these moments. Remember, Derek Carr for 1 year, we were talking about before, I think he broke his collarbone or something, right? We were talking about him being an MVP candidate, and it just never came back together. I know he was part of the Raiders and that organization, but if it doesn't pan out this year, right? There's no Jameis this year. There's no one. There's Spencer Rattler, right? But we all agree he's got to develop. There's not anyone breathing down his neck this year. If he doesn't work out, he's going to be a clipboard guy, or he's going to be kind of a Ryan Fitzpatrick, McCown, like moving through the league at this point. This is a chance, but I think he's on the decline, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I got Deshaun Watson. This is just insanely difficult to rank because I mean he has upside obviously up here, but sometimes he plays down here. I think when it comes to Watson, he's one of those guys that I don't think he's there like mentally. I don't know how much he like loves the game of football. I'm not a huge fan of his girlfriend. She dated DeJounte Murray, and when they were dating, he kind of just like went off the rails for a bit, and I think he could be like done, but I'm not ready to say he's like last chance you level.
I've got $400 million that say why he's not done, but
right. I guess I'll put him like at the top of Chad Pennington. I thought when everyone was talking about him last year as like a top 10 quarterback, I thought they were like a little crazy because, this guy is a guy that hasn't played football for 2 years of his life. And now he has to come in with all these allegations that he has, all this. Like, I just don't know if you can recover from something like that. And so I'm going to put him.
Forget the allegations, right? And not that the allegations aren't important. So, first of all, I would have him ahead of Bryce Young. If there's a level of physical talent that I think precedes him and precludes him to deserving a little more respect.
Okay.
But Flacco came in and took that team to the playoffs. I ardently believe that Joe Flacco is not a Cleveland Brown because they're scared of what's going to happen if they go 1-2, 2-4.
Right.
People are going to be chanting Flacco on the sidelines,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, they've got DTR on the sideline, but there's no one's breathing down his neck. Deshaun Watson, yes, he had the injuries. He was away for a bit. Another guy, what does he get better at? Right? We all saw in that year he beat the Bills, I think, and barely lost to the Chiefs or whatever in that playoff run before everything in Houston went sideways. He's still that guy, right? Lamar Jackson's one of my favorite examples. He came back. Remember, everybody criticized him his first 2 years. He came back. Look at his completion percentage. I know he's not, dinking and dunking and like dicing everybody up, but Lamar Jackson's a really good passer now, right? Mm-hmm. He's not just the run. And that's a big thing that I don't see from Deshaun. So Deshaun is, to me, he's kind of an albatross of a quarterback contract right now. And there's not much else to it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Deshaun, I almost put him in like Last Chance U, and I did kind of what you were talking about to where like you can't because of the talent, but I genuinely believe that if the Browns don't pan out on offense, that he could be like on his way out to me. And I think he's more likely to be that way than the other way up. And that's kind of why I put him in that like Chad Pennington.
I think he's almost franchise because of the talent and pedigree, but I will say if this doesn't work out this year, everybody in Cleveland gets fired, probably, realistically. But much like David Tepper, the only person that the Cleveland Browns have to blame is Jimmy Haslam, right? Yeah. He's up there as far as not great owners, but we'll see what happens. But I want to see more out of him, but at the same time, he's in a tough division.
Yeah, well,
you got the Bengals, and you've got the Steelers, and you've got the Ravens.
Right.
And he has a top defense.
Oh, well,
can't blame it on that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Last year, the Browns were actually a dark horse Super Bowl team for me. I bet them to make the playoffs. And I didn't even lose the bet because I had Joe Flacco. I mean, it's not like Deshaun wouldn't have done that, but like the fact that the team even made the playoffs with Joe Flacco to me is wild, right? So like that kind of shows that team has a ton of talent, and they didn't even have Nick Chubb. So this team, the Browns, they have a top 3, top 5 defense. They have a top 3, top 5 offensive line. They have Nick Chubb, top 3 running back. So he's got absolutely
Amari Cooper's nice,
right?
Amari Cooper's still a good receiver.
They like this team. If you have like talent wise and you remove the quarterback, I think this team could be like in that 49ers discussion almost. Like they're up there with how talented their team is. And like you said, the division's really the only thing holding them back. And if Deshaun Watson can be an Anthony Angel, then this team could be once again a dark horse Super Bowl team.
Hold up. So if he can be an Anthony's Angel, you see the potential. Then I feel like having him Chad Pennington's not fair, man. You just skipped him a level. I'm pushing back a little bit, and I'm not saying he's at the top of Anthony's. At the almost franchise, but
all right, I'll put him back here because you're so angry. But I can't.
I'm not angry. It's just a question. Okay, don't be a snowflake. Don't be a snowflake, Alex. I know you look like one. Because you haven't been in the sun in a while. But come on.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I think he's more likely to bust out than more likely to be out of the league than be back into that top 10 conversation. That's how I feel about him.
Okay. I've got Geno Smith, and I don't want to talk too much about this because there's not too much to talk about. He is, to me, behind Bo Nix. I will say this. Comeback story, right? In a lot of ways, I love this story because he got his jaw broken by a teammate in New York, right? Yeah. He's changed. I talked about this last year. I watched him interact on a couple podcasts where I really appreciate it. I actually think he's super intelligent. Like I think I would actually want to hang out with him.
Hmm.
But he's not making the most of what's in front of him, and I mean that by it's a solid. They have solid pieces. I know Pete Carroll's gone, but they have solid pieces. And I've told you for a while as a value, I think that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and now they have who's the
Oh,
third
Jackson
receiver?
Smith and Jigba. That the Seahawks
Correct.
are another team that are up there with the weapons, and you add the running backs in there.
That
You got Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker as well.
right.
Yeah,
And those are good contracts too. And
right.
that's the piece where um, I said for a while, but before I knew the Will Anderson trade, I said if we draft CJ Stroud, I said they should package up and get DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett as a package deal because I think they are just so wonderful as a combination. Back in the day, Marcus Colston was a guy that I was like, I don't know what he does, but he always has like 12 touchdowns, right? And Lance Moore, Marcus Colston, Lance Moore. Drew Brees made it happen. I think he can be a Drew Brees at the end of his career type player, but he's got to make the most because unlike some of the other, teams where we've said there's been mismanagement, other than Jamal Adams, the Seahawks have done a pretty good job with that team.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right.
And you got Sam Howell breathing down his neck as well. I mean, we have a guy later on talking about him, but I got Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I think you give him like 3 weeks and he's a backup. So I'll put him at last chance you. I think I'd probably rather have him over than these couple of guys just with the experience that he has. He can come in, he's probably one of the better backups in the NFL. But outside of that, there's
Yeah.
probably much to discuss about him.
No. But he's kind of in that Joe Flacco vein right now, right? I know Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl years ago, but I'm talking about is as far as what they provide now. Um, he comes in, he starts, he does okay, but he's just you hope he doesn't have to play at all, and you hope that if he has to play, it's only 2 or 3 games. But
Right.
I'm curious to see what they do in New England. I think I have some aspirations for what I think Drake May can be, but unfortunately, I am not high on how I think they're going to develop him.
Yeah.
All
So
right,
you got Jalen Hurts.
oh, good thing you don't get him. One of my best friends thinks he's a bum. I do not think he's a bum, but he is a guy,
Can you
and I'm going to talk
can you
about it
give me
again.
that guy's contact so we can talk about it? Or are you talking about me?
Uh, no,
No, I
it's
don't think. I
Walker.
don't think. Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Walker
So
thinks.
Walker's like a Cowboys fan
Yeah,
then at that point.
no, like Walker is not a Cowboys fan. He is more an Eagles fan actually than a Cowboys fan. I'll tell you that. No, so um, Jalen Hurts needs to come back and show me that he can run an on schedule offense. I think they've lost pieces on the defense, and they can't take the gambles they did. And Jason Kelsey's not there. I'm really actually curious what that does to the moxie of the O line or the relationship that O line has together. Um, I will say he is ahead of Baker Mayfield
Oh,
in
okay.
almost franchise. I I just cannot put him up there. I know he was dinged up at the end of last year, but I was really disappointed to see him not come back and be a little bit more. And losing Shane Steichen hurts. I fully understand that new coordinator. I was disappointed because they've got receiving talents and he's got weapons, but I I don't think he'll ever be Hims. I'll be honest, but the last year I thought he would be always in tier two, right? Like I
Hmm.
always thought he'd be in tier two, but now he is. Um, he could be the 12th best quarterback. He could be the sixth best quarterback, but I didn't. I'm hoping nobody. I'm hoping what didn't happen is did the league figure him out, right? I don't think that's the case, but he's got to prove that.
Yeah, I never really believed in the Jalen Hurts hype at all. I mean, I'm like a Cowboys fan, but I do watch him a lot, and so that's the other thing. I think everything we talk about a guy like Brock Purdy. I think everything was just handed to him. Obviously he has that running ability, but we got a top number one offensive line. Now you got Saquon Barkley. You got two of the best receivers in the league. You had a great defense. Now you remove Kelsey from that offensive line. You got some aging offensive linemen and remove the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, the rough things start happening to your team. And it's like, if this guy's a franchise quarterback, that shouldn't be an issue. I mean, that Eagles team should have beat a team like the Bucks in the playoffs if they were that good, right?
I agree, but that's the same discussion I have on Dak Prescott, right? It's a
Oh
similar
yeah,
discussion as far
right.
as the pieces are there. I just think Dak's done it for more years, right?
Okay,
And so that's why I still have Dak at the. I think when we're done, Dak is going to be at the very end of Anthony's Angels, right? He's going to be on that
right.
part where, and part of that is in my head, I'm thinking, what do they do with that contract next year? All right. Jared
So
Goff.
I got Goff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know if we've talked about this, but I feel like I'm pretty hot on Jared Goff. I
Okay.
think here's a guy that was, the first overall pick. He went to the Rams. He was drafted very young at the time with a team that's moving to, Los Angeles. There was a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He kind of got moved over to Detroit, and I feel like it was a good move for him. Great fit now. I think now that I'm talking about it, I mean, he does have a pretty easier offense to play with. He's got the top 5 offensive line in Detroit. He's got a great running game. It's tough.
Yeah, but he helped those guys develop, right?
Yeah. Well, the other
So
thing,
so that
he gives me
oh
like
god.
quarterback aura as well. I think we can maybe move him later, but I'm going to put him behind Rodgers. I think said it. We have a lot of great quarterbacks coming along here. So once we review at the end, I mean, I think he'll be in that top 10-ish range, and that's how I feel about him. So
I I agree from the standpoint of I do think he's slightly better than Dak. I think the contract they just gave him is right on the line of where Jared Goff, Dak Prescott ought to be, right, as far as salary cap and all that
what
stuff
what was
goes.
it again? I didn't actually see the actual like details of it.
Around 50, around
Okay.
50 some a year,
Yeah.
right, which is fine, right? He shouldn't be pushing past 55. I don't think he is. If he is, it's right around 54, but that's fine, right?
Hmm.
I understand the logic there. Um, I think big part is he fits that city, he fits that coach, he fits that team. You know, Ben Johnson stayed as the coordinator, which is Ben Johnson probably could have had a job this year, right? Same as Slowick, right?
Yeah. Right.
I'm excited to see what they do. He's helped that team develop. I think he's capable of winning a Super Bowl. I don't know that he's going to be the guy that wills his team to the Super Bowl, but I'll say this: the gap between Jared Goff and Joe Burrow is not as wide as I thought it was a year ago.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Um, okay.
So you
I've got Jaden
Jaden.
Daniels. All right. To be fair, I don't know that I think Jaden Daniels deserved the Heisman. I understand it. I don't think there was a clear Heisman guy that, unlike a lot of other years, there wasn't a guy I watched this year where I go, that's the Heisman, right? Like you see
Yeah.
like the
Who would you have given
the
it to?
Derrick Henrys. I wish there was a certain level that they didn't have to give up the Heisman last year. There was just no one where I was like, hey, this is the guy, right? Maybe Penix, but it was tough. And I'll say this: you take out his two games where you take out his two best games and two worst games, he's a mediocre quarterback, right? And went to LSU with all that talent. He didn't produce. He's one of those quarterbacks there where if you take it away, right? Oh, he had this ratio. Well, he had 5 touchdowns against our sister Mary, right? You take that out. Oh, okay, things start to balance out. You take out his worst game. It's and I'll say this: go back and look at the schedule. Go tell me the game. All games matter. Go tell me the game of consequence that Jaden Daniels took his team and won. Like put him on his back, right? He's a number 2 pick. They lost against Alabama. They lost against FSU. And there's another game I can't remember that they lost. He didn't come from a, Western Michigan or like a Washington where we don't have those expectations.
Hmm.
LSU has championship aspirations. He didn't live up to them, man. I'm not saying he had to win the national championship, but they lost games that he just didn't show up in, right? Like, oh, he showed up. He made terrible decisions in the FSU game, and they lost the Alabama game for a reason. And Alabama was vulnerable this year, right?
Uh huh.
That's why part of why Saban left. And so As far as where I rank him, I'm going to rank him behind Hurts. Behind Hurts.
Okay.
From the standpoint of, I think he is more physically talented than Baker. I think he runs the offense well. I don't think he's going to struggle with, understanding the schemes or, making the right play. I just don't know if he's going to be. I'll say this: Dak and Jared Goff, for all my, aspersions, they will try to carry the team on their back if they have to, right? And there's games where Dak has won them the game and Jared Goff's won them the game. I don't know that Jaden Daniels is going to be that guy, and I just was not impressed about his time at LSU.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have too much of an opinion on Jaden Daniels. I feel like I'm just going to let it play out and we'll see what happens. I think he probably deservingly, to me, was the second best quarterback in the draft. I'm not too hot on Drake May. I think Drake May is very erratic with the football. And so I feel like Jaden Daniels, kind of like what you were saying, he has the physical aspects. He has everything you want. And it's just like, can he bring that to the Commanders, right? So I got Joe Burrow. I'm super hot on Joe Burrow. I have him in my Dynasty Fantasy League. I know you're not super hot on fantasy, but I think we have the same.
I'm so good at it. It wouldn't be fair to everybody else.
Oh
Man.
yeah. I'll tell that one to Abby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll clip that one. But yeah, Joe Burrow, I'm really hot on. I think the one question mark that you have on him is like, can he stay healthy? And if he can stay healthy,
Yep.
he's probably the only quarterback to me that I feel comfortable going toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes. And so, with all that being said, and we rated him the same last year, I hope you're at the same aspirations here. I have him at the Hims category. I think he is a plus quarterback, and I love his game.
I think he is an A quarterback. I think not A plus. He's an A quarterback. I think that this only other question I have for him is this is the first year he's going to lose some weapons, right? And seeing what it looks like when Jamar Chase doesn't have coverage pulled him away with Boyd out there, and who knows what happens with T Higgins. Joe Burrow, I think he is one of the last few traditional pocket quarterbacks.
Yeah,
truly, right? Penix could be right, but we don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, but he ran like a 4.5 40 time, so
yeah. he is, but that's not his game, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, his knees say he has to, right? But which is funny that Kirk Cousins is coming back from that injury, and they took a guy that has a history of injuries. We can get into that later, but Burrow is, to me, I feel like he's going to remain a top tier quarterback, top 4 conversation, but he's at risk of, remember, Aaron Rodgers won that first Super Bowl. We said he's going to be back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never happened, right? And for a lot of reasons, it just never came together. Russell Wilson never kind of came back, right? It's possible. And so I think it's very possible he's at the top of Anthony's Angels next year, and he becomes that guy, if that makes sense. Like,
right.
Because there's other guys that are going to come up, and you can't have 10 guys in the top category. You can have 4, maybe 5 tops, but I'd struggle to go beyond 4.
Yeah. So you got Jordan Love.
I'm going to put Jordan Love behind Hurts in that.
Okay.
They did. He came on strong last year, and I think Jordan Love, everybody who says, oh, Jordan Love should have been playing this whole time, no. Jordan Love was raw. He was, he needed to sit for a couple years. Maybe not behind Aaron, but he needed to sit. But to your point, it's a roller coaster. One thing, though, is he was drafted around the same time, and he has a better rapport with those young receivers. But I'm curious what happens with David Bakhtiari possibly being gone and that team. But to me, Jordan Love is potentially Jameis Winston in some ways, right? They don't necessarily play the same way, but the recklessness, right, and the highs and the lows, and they're going to be competitive. But we're going to talk about another guy later who I think is like Jameis Winston for similar reasons, right? Are you going to always put it together?
Yeah. I feel like last year when it came to playoffs, and I know I am a Cowboys fan, but there's a part of me that thinks that Packers playoff run that they had was like more miracle than what they truly are. And I feel the NFC North is a very competitive. It's going to be start being a very competitive division, right? You got the Lions, you got the Packers, you got the Bears, and you got the Vikings. And I feel like this whole division is very competitive. And there are people out there that are just super hot on the Packers, super hot on Jordan Love. And I came into the season thinking that. And then once I started watching a lot of Jordan Love, I'm like, wait, I don't know. Like he's just a little bit Brett Favre, I guess, which like maybe that's a good thing. But I mean, he's fun to watch. He might be one of the more fun quarterbacks in the league. But there are some times where you're just like, that was just not the throw to make. And that happened more at the beginning of the season than at the end of the season. So that kind of transitions into the next guy that I have here is Josh Allen. And I've been very critical on him throughout like his entire career. I feel he had that one season where he was bananas, and he's kind of regressed ever since Dayball, left. But at the same time, he's still Josh Allen. So I'm going to put him at the top of Anthony's Angels. I see Josh Allen more as.
Wow.
Where'd you think I was going to have him?
I thought he was behind Burrow.
Oh, no. I don't know if I can put him in there. I was just going to say, I think Josh Allen, to me, is more top 5 than top 3, top 2. I think he's very erratic with the football. He can be crazy. I mean, at the end of this, maybe once we add a couple more guys, we can put him at the end. But how I view him is I view Josh Allen as like the 5th best quarterback in the league, right? I have maybe Herbert over him. I have Burrow. I have Mahomes. Lamar, I think I would consider, and then Mahomes. I don't know if I said Mahomes already, but anyways, I feel like a lot of people, if you had asked him a year, 2, 3 years ago, they have definitively he's the number 2 quarterback in the league, and now I feel like we got some guys that are kind of jumping him a little bit, and so yeah,
his high is Brett Favre, right? Like I think at his best, Josh Allen is Brett Favre. I don't like the John Elway comps. I actually think Justin Herbert is more an Elway type reckless guy, but he gets better, right? I think Josh Allen belongs to be in the him category. He stays healthy, right? He gets his team to the playoffs. They've won the division, and his low though is he's reckless, and I'm trying to think of a guy. His low is like a bad Ben Roethlisberger. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a piece. I think you're being a little harsh. I think, yes, losing Dayball hurt. I still think Sean McDermott doesn't deserve to be a head coach. The guy who started Nathan Peterman that many times and never pulled him doesn't deserve to be a head coach. He's not maximizing that team's value. And now with Stephon gone and all that, there's real questions about their window, but it seems like they've adjusted their cap and they're really, they're kind of like the Cowboys. They're going to make a push this year, but I think both teams have angled themselves to make big moves in next offseason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think my problem with Josh Allen is, we talked about it with Jordan Love. I feel like Josh Allen is the guy that almost every single game, he's going to have 1 or 2 plays that are like drastically bad for the offense. And sure, you get those, 20 other plays that are amazing. And he does the miracle Caleb Williams type, play. But then he has just some like boneheaded throws that are just wildly off. And they change the direction of the game entirely. And I feel like that's the reason why Stephon Diggs left the team. And yeah, maybe my, interceptions to going from hymns to Anthony's Angels is maybe a little too aggressive. And like I said, I'm open to putting him up there. But all I'm trying to say is like I see him more top 5 than top 3, top 2. That's what it is. And I don't know how many people are going to have in the hymns category, so that's why I place him there. But you got Justin Herbert. He's another great one to talk about.
And so you just made my job really hard because I would have had Herbert and Josh Allen tied.
Okay, well, I'll just put him up here then, and then you.
No. Moving back.
Okay.
Let's be honest to the board. Let's put Herbert up there, right?
Where do you want
Herbert?
him?
Herbert is behind. He's behind Burrow right now. He's behind Burrow. If it kind of goes both ways, I could at the end of this seeing us move Herbert down 1 or Josh Allen up one, right?
Okay.
Like it could go either way. Um, Herbert's good, like really, really good, but that's it. And I think this is the reason I'm saying his comp is John Elway. You know me, I love my comps. What was John Elway before Shanahan and Terrell Davis got there?
Hmm.
Great quarterback, right? Super Bowls even, but then couldn't close the deal, right? Gets a running game, gets a run first offense into the zone. Now, in it, not Shanahan, Harbaugh runs a different scheme, but it's going to be a run first offense, right? They're shifting the way that, and now Herbert is going to, instead of have to be excellent on every play, he's going to be himself. He is going to be very good most plays, and he's going to be asked a couple times a game to be excellent, right? To be
Hmm.
that difference maker. I think this is a really good fit, and that's why I think he's John Elway from the standpoint of if they can reel it in. He's not reckless like Burrow, right? There's not games where how the hell did he throw three interceptions and fumble twice, right? Like none of that happens.
You're right.
Um, but I think he's kind of in that mold of a quarterback where when he gets the run game and they run a steady offense, it's going to be best for him. And he could win a Super Bowl this way, right? Now he has to go through the Chiefs, right? That's really freaking hard. But that's why I have him there. But I can't put him ahead of Burrow because there are times when, I think they're down and out and Burrow's like, hey, I am him, right?
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, I don't know where he pulled that out of, right?
Yeah.
Pulled a rabbit out of a hat, but that's where I think he is.
I agree. I used to have Herbert over Burrow, and after the past couple years, I had to put Burrow over him because, like you said, Burrow has that kind of like mentality to where like Herbert's kind of missing that. And I talked about a little bit like more the off field, leadership kind of stuff to where Burrow's just got he's him, right? He's him, and Herbert is him too, I think. And like you said, I'm very curious to see how this offense goes with Harbaugh, and just I think the Chargers are going to be such a fun team to watch this year.
Burrow's kind of got like that cool guy vibes, and Herbert's definitely got like dad vibes, right?
Yeah, right.
Same talent, super talented, but like just the way they come about it. I thank God that you have this guy because I'm going to get trashed for everything I say about this next guy.
Yeah, so yeah, this is a good one because I think I'm going to be a little bit more fair with him. But I'll say this: I think Kirk Cousins. I think last year he was like MVP type play, and I'm not saying he's MVP because like Dak Prescott is the same like version of him, right? To where they're very similar, but they were putting up these like crazy numbers to where if you look at it and screenshot it, you're like, okay, this guy had 30 touchdowns, he had 5-6 interceptions, and he had 5,000 passing yards, whatever, or maybe not that many, but 4,500 passing yards. And he, what I'm trying to say is
The year before, right? Because he's coming back off the
well,
injury.
before he got hurt, he was having a super good
Yeah.
year.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like the offense looked
Okay. That's
insane,
fair.
electric, and so I'm going to put him at the end. Once again, I feel like it's hard to put him at the end of your Angels because I don't know if he is an angel for you. But we'll see. I think there's definitely going to be some question marks now with the Penix draft and him coming off of the Achilles and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like trying to base off of last season, and I feel the same with Rodgers. You're like, all right, let's have optimistic views of this guy, and therefore I have him at the back of Anthony's Angels. I think Kirk Cousins to me is a top 12 quarterback, and so he deserves that rank.
Oh boy,
I know you
I
had him
would
probably
have
Chad
him.
Pennington.
No, the way he played the last 2 years before injury, um, changed my mind about him. Like I'm harsh on him. Short story, but actually I won't tell the story. But Kirk Cousins is the reason I don't bet sports anymore. That's all I'm going to say. Um, I think he is better than Baker. I think he's somewhere along with Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, that vibe from the standpoint of he's not a young man anymore, right? At least in as far as the league goes. Um, he kind of is a roller coaster, but his roller coaster is tighter, right? Instead of the Josh Allen or Jordan Love like high low, he's kind of like this kind of roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just don't think he's necessarily a difference maker. I think is to me is
Can
he all that different than is he all that different than Brock Purdy? Really? Like as
Yeah,
far
no,
as
probably not.
and so that's why I Dak has made more out of less, right? Jared Goff has made more out of less. I think Kirk Cousins is like Geno Smith in a lot of ways, right? There's Justin Jefferson, there was Stephon Diggs, there's um, Jordan Addison, and yeah, he puts up numbers, but what has it amounted to, right? And it's um, I think that's high for him. I get what you're talking about, but to me, he's kind of almost franchise, and I think he was paid around that, right? Like high 40s, right?
Mhm.
But um, I think he could be at the end of or in almost franchise or at the top of Chad Pennington at the end of next year. I don't think he's going to move any higher than this, if that makes any sense.
Question for you: do you think the Falcons can win the Super Bowl this year?
No, because I don't think the defensive pieces are really there. And I could be wrong, right? I was wrong about the Texans and their run, but I think the offensive pieces are there. But Kirk Cousins is on his way back, right? And a new offense on a new team. They're going to lose some of that OTAs. I know he's throwing there, but there's that timing, and then Michael Penix is there. It's a weird now. I will say that the Falcons head coach is one of my favorite from the standpoint of number. He was the Bucks when they had the Josh Freeman fiasco, right? I think at the time, besides Lane Kiffin, he was one of the youngest head coaches ever. But Raheem Morris is awesome. You go on the Pivot podcast, you listen to how Sean McVay speaks about him. Guys have been saying for a while he deserves to be a head coach again, right? He's not a retread like a Todd Bowles or someone where I'm like, I'm not sure. Like Raheem Morris has really grown, and he was thrust into a position real young as far as head coaches go. And I think this is a really good hire, right? I think it's a good hire. Um, the big one is I think they can win if they absolutely just beat up on the division and have a top two seed, right?
Right.
And that it has to go through them. Atlanta's got a great fan base, but no, I think, between the 49ers, I think as talented as the Eagles are, the Cowboys, I think the NFC is easier, but I don't think they're there yet. I could see them going in 2 years.
Hmm.
Like this is the year that they all gel together. I could see them going in 2 years to the Super Bowl when it all comes together, right? Either Penix shows out and like he really leads, or Kirk Cousins really figures out the system and they make something happen there.
Yeah, I
But
think why I asked is because to me, mostly when I view this, I think of the top two rows as guys that are going to be on a Super Bowl winning team, and so that's why I view as Kirk Cousins and the Falcons as a team that, like you said, could be in that like dark horse miracle run type thing to where they're the second seed because of the division being easy. They beat down on them. They have a great offensive line. The defense showed up. They have insane weapons like Bijan, Kyle Pitts, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I just like if in the world that Kirk Cousins would win a Super Bowl, like like at that point where do you kind of place him, right? And so that's why
the Saints, yeah, the
I kind
Saints are
of
still going to
view.
be the Ants. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I view pretty much like the top half of quarterbacks as legitimate guys that I could see like holding the trophy, even in like the craziest world, right? And that maybe where Brock Purdy is. He might be at the end of that list, but he's like the bare minimum as a guy that I could see being on a Super Bowl winning team,
Yeah,
right? That's kind
that's
of
fair.
like how I view Kirk. So he's like in that like top 15 range. Probably a little bit more, like I said, top 12, 13. But I think he's like a B quarterback.
I think he's top 16, right?
Okay.
Like that is and numbers belie a lot of things from the standpoint of Tua puts up great numbers, but we have questions about Tua, right? And that's kind of my not comp, but my argument as to why I think you have him high. I would not put Tua quite that high, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I've got Kyler Murray.
This
I am going to put him ahead of Jordan Love.
okay.
Um, I have always had issues dating back to his time in high school, and I know kids grow up, but I've had issues with him since his time at in high
Was it like
school.
Allen?
I think he was at Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it, Kyler Murray is the reason I don't think Spencer Rattler is going to work out. They're barkers, right? I don't think they always take fault. They don't play that well. They're really not that good, right? You take out some games. Sorry, they have moments where they are great, especially Kyler. Um, but that team and that contract, it just doesn't work. And part of it is Arizona's a tough franchise, right, to be a quarterback for. But remember, coming into midway through the year until the very end and their draft positioning and all that, remember, we were talking about the Cardinals potentially trading Kyler and moving on, right, depending on where their position in the draft was. Um, I'll say this: if they were the number one pick for whatever reason,
I
right?
think they
Say
maybe
Kyler doesn't
would.
come back,
Yeah.
right? Even two for Jaden Daniels just to get to a cheaper contract because there's a team out there, right? There's a world out there where Dak leaves next year and Jerry goes and brings Kyler back to Dallas,
Oh, I would take
right? Like
that.
that.
Yeah.
There's a world where that happens, but Kyler doesn't have. He doesn't have he's not quarterbackial, right? I think I'm stealing that from Colin Cowherd. He's not quarterbackial. He's great player, great talented, but he doesn't have something where I don't feel like his team follows him, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that is super intangible. But also, I just don't love his attitude, body language, any of that, man. I just don't think it's fair to put him up there.
Okay. So I got Lamar Jackson. I mean, coming off of a MVP season, and I feel like you got to give him his respect at that point. Like you said, he's kind of a he's definitely like even gotten better as a quarterback, and I also feel like he was. I could be wrong, but he's like on the younger side. I feel so he's still kind of like making his way within the league and learning and doing all that kind of stuff. I think the one question mark you have to have about Lamar is like when is he going to show up in one of those big games, right? I mean, the Ravens were favored.
Beat the Texans. He beat the Texans.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the Ravens were favored against the Chiefs, and he didn't have a great game. I think he only had like 9 completions or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we were kind of waiting. I'll put it this way, right? Lamar was coming off an MVP season. The Ravens were kind of touted as this team that were going to go to the Super Bowl, right? It was going to be the Ravens versus the 49ers. We're going to get that rematch back. And they were at home, and they were 4.5 point favorites to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. And the offense just like really didn't show up, right? And so I think that's the one gripe that you can have about Lamar Jackson. But at the end of the day, he's got that attitude to where he's going to keep getting better. He's one of the guys that I feel can place blame on himself even when it's not his fault. And so I'm going to put him right behind Burrow. I'm going to have him as the third best quarterback in the league.
I would. There's part of me that wants to put him ahead of Burrow, but they both had injury histories, all that
Right.
stuff. To me, they're 2A and 2B, right? If that makes sense.
Right.
Lamar, like we just said, comes back and gets better. And I'll say this: he was stuck with Greg Roman forever.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm a fan of Jim Harbaugh, and I think Greg Roman is great with offensive lines, I think that's why Jim Harbaugh brought Greg Roman to the Chargers, right? We're getting into the technical stuff. Todd Monken, I think, is great what he did at Georgia. I think that offense, right, where you're running and pounding it, but you take shots down the field and you get receivers open by running to pass almost. I think in a second year, and this year there's not the distraction of OBJ, right? They've got some pieces now. I think a second year in this offense and familiarity, he's coming off an MVP season, and I think maybe he might not be better statistically, but I think they could be better. They got Derrick Henry as a threat now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they've got receivers that are younger that are coming up. Mark Andrews is going to be healthy again, right? I think they could be better. Look at what Todd Monken did with the Georgia offense and in the SEC, right? And I know they were talented, but look at what he did. I think he's going to be really, really solid. I think he may not win MVP, but he could honestly have a really good year. And I think the Ravens are going to be interesting. The Ravens are kind of that team that, players fall to them. Lamar Jackson fell to them, right?
Hmm.
Everybody passed on Kyle Hamilton, and he's on his way to being like a Pro Bowler, right? Like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
he's a great
He's already
safety, and
like a
so
top three safety in the league, probably, or top
uh,
five.
and exactly, and so the Ravens might be truly right. I know Ozzy's gone, but I forgive me, I forget the name of their current GM. The Ravens, while they don't have a ton of Super Bowls, might be one of the perennial best run teams, right, for a long time. Dating back to the 2000s, right? They've had some down years, but they're never in
Yeah.
the gutter for
They're
very
always
long.
like
So
consistent. They're
yeah,
kind of like the
yep,
Steelers almost. They're kind of the same. They
yep.
play and they're in the same division, but they kind of play the football way, right? Like very hard nosed, a lot of good defense, and yeah, the Ravens are obviously always in the conversation. So Matt Stafford is going to be the next one. Where do you have him?
I have him ahead of Rodgers.
Okay.
I think at his best, right? He's 6, 7, 8, right at his best. Not saying he is that. I think. Remember, we were all wondering, are they going to trade Matt Stafford? Is he going to be healthy?
Yeah.
I think he showed last year that, holy crap, like they were dealing with salary cap issues, right, from the Super Bowl run and all that. Aaron Donald's gone, but Matt Stafford showed last year that he can kind of hold a team together and run an offense. And um, I've always said I honestly think Matt Stafford is just as physically talented as Aaron Rodgers, right? As far as what he can do with the football, um, I just seem it just feels like Matt Stafford's got a real command of that team, right? And it's especially with Aaron Donald being gone and Andrew Whitworth retiring. Matt Stafford's the voice in that locker room now, right? And
I don't know
I
if you
think that's
said
a
it
good
either,
thing.
but Cooper Cup was hurt last season. I had the
Yeah,
Rams winning like
and
under 7 games last year, and now coming into this season, they're probably already like a top 10 team. I mean, they played the Lions down to the wire.
they're going to two things. I think this is why Geno Smith has an uphill battle, and I think this is why Brock Purdy has an uphill battle. Right? It's going to be hard when you've got Matt Stafford there, and he's got a team, and Sean McVay, I think, will stay there as long as they've got Matt Stafford, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that's a good place for him. I think
I
there's
think I would
worlds
have
where
done
I
the
think
same
he
thing.
okay, cool.
Yeah. So I got Patrick Mahomes. I feel like every time I do a list like this, it's like, do we even have to have a conversation? Feel the same about NFL team rankings to where when we have the Chiefs on there, I refuse to even put them lower than one. Even though when
Yeah,
sometimes you think that you can count them out, it just never happens, right? I mean, last year was the one time where the Chiefs could have been not the best team in the NFL, and they're still the best team in the NFL, right? And so I feel
look, man, he won a Super Bowl with Kadarius Toney on the roster.
yeah.
Okay, they're I may not love the Chiefs. I may not love Patrick Mahomes, but he is stupid talented, right? He just makes something out of nothing, right? Like winning a Super Bowl the year before on basically a sprained ankle, and what he did this year without the talent. Tyreek's gone and all that stuff. I'm glad they drafted a receiver. It's curious. I'm curious to see, but him and Andy Reid, man, just them together, and then Steve Spagnuolo at defensive coordinator, like they've got something. And the big one is, um, they're not missing Eric Bieniemy, right? They really put it on at the end of the year, and Steve Spagnuolo is, I think he's at a point. It seems like where his name isn't constantly in the what's it called head coaching carousel,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You've got the foundations where Andy Reid runs the offense, Spagnuolo runs the defense. You've got Pat at quarterback. You've got kind of what the Patriots had for a little while,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Other than Bill O'Brien and Josh McDaniels rolling in and out, there is stability, and think about like how stability has been for obviously that's why dynasties happen, right? But how important that is, and look, man, he is the number one player, and now he's chasing Brady in Montana, right? That's
Oh yeah.
that's what he's doing, right? In a lot of ways, I think he's better than Montana. I think that's definitely an argument, right? Um, he's more talented than Brady, right? He is.
Hmm.
he's one of the few guys where he won a Super Bowl and he kept living up to the hype, right? Think about all the other guys that got to or won a Super Bowl and never like kind of lived up to that again. Russell Wilson never lived up to it. Aaron Rodgers never lived up. Pat Mahomes has just lived up to it, and it's not like
Right.
he came out of nowhere like a Brady 7th round pick and snuck his way in. He's been a critical component of that team. He's playing now to be the best, right? Like he
Right.
is
Right.
in that Michael Jordan, LeBron James discussion of I am playing to be the freaking best.
Right. So you got Russell Wilson. Glad that you have him because I would be very mean to him.
I put in my head at Derek Carr.
Okay.
Um, as talented as Russell Wilson is, and say a game that I play with Walker every once in a while, one of my best friends is we'll talk about athletes, good hang or bad hang, right? I bet you Joe Burrow is a good hang. I would hang out with that guy. And there's something to be said about guys that are relatable that to their teammates want to. I think Russell Wilson's a bad hang. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's a bad hang,
Right.
right? Um, and I think that's you see videos of Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady just chugging beers with their guys, and they have wives, they have kids. It's not like
Yeah.
you can't have both, but there's something about Russell Wilson that doesn't land with me. And the other one is he's another guy that in hindsight, I don't think he ever got better, right? After his second or third year, did he ever improve? Did he ever get more accurate? Did he ever get better at protecting the football, or did he play to the strengths of his team? And that's how he does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
He's not a Lamar or even Josh Allen comes back and got better at things. I look back at it and Russell Wilson kind of wants to pat the ball, throw it down the field, or make something happen. Well, he's not as fast or young as he used to be, right? Couldn't be taking those hits. And, when you don't have Marshawn Lynch and you don't have DK Metcalf, I'll say part of the issue with the Broncos is I think their wide receiver room, I know Judy's not there anymore, but Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, everybody's like, oh, they've got these weapons. What makes them weapons? They were solid in college, but what have they ever done that says, hey, these are guys,
Right.
right? And so there's that, and Pittsburgh's not that much better, right? Like you've got some pieces
Pickens.
that have high potential,
Right.
right? But look at what Pickens flipped out with Pickett last year,
Right. Right.
right? like how many tantrums did he throw? And so I'm sorry, and he's going to be any better with Russell Wilson, right?
Mm.
I think he's smart, but I think I'll be honest. I think I overrated Russell Wilson for a long time, and I was blinded by the quarterback wins, right, and some of the stats. I'm starting to see now why he was never really in the MVP discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of never been super hot on him. I think he's just always been like carried, and I totally agree with the whole like hang thing as well. I mean, this is a guy that had his own office at the Broncos, and it's just I feel he always has himself over a pedestal, and maybe he doesn't anymore. Maybe he's kind of changing, but we'll see. I think he's got like the smallest. What is it like? He can be out within like 3 or 4 games. And I think the Steelers Nation will be, chanting for Fields to come in. But I obviously have bias on both sides very heavily. So
I'll say this, man. I think you just look at the quarterbacks, right? Even Kirk Cousins. I think you get all the way down to Kyler Murray before you say any of these guys might be a bad hang, right?
yeah,
Every guy. I don't love Jalen Hurts, but I think he'd be a decent hang. But Kirk Cousins, like actually, he might be a cool guy to like get a beer with. You get to.
maybe
And
Deshaun
I hate to
Watson.
say it, that's definitely not hanging with him, right? And like,
Yeah,
Jordan Love, I don't know, right? I
Rodgers
don't,
could be
but
controversial.
Aaron Rodgers is a bad hang to me, but that is because I don't particularly care for Aaron Rodgers off the field antics,
Right.
right? Um, I I just I think two athletes I compare a lot are Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James from the standpoint of how controversial they can be, right? except LeBron James is hyper successful, has won championships, and is in the GOAT discussion. Aaron Rodgers acts like he should be in the GOAT discussion and just doesn't come through.
Yeah, I can
And
kind of
that's
see
that's
that.
that's what I'm kind of sick of because he got to beat up on the Lions and the Bears and all this stuff, right? Let's see what happens when he has to play the Bills and the Dolphins, right? The Pats are but
Well,
if
the Pats have a
not
good
saying Tua's
defense
great,
at least still, but right.
agreed, but Tua's not better than Aaron necessarily, but Mike McDaniels is a great coach. What's Aaron Rodgers going to do when they're down 21 to Miami because Miami got off to a hot start? Is he gonna let's see what happens, and that's I think Aaron Rodgers is a bad hang, but that is me specifically, and I also think he's a bit of a snowflake. But
Yeah.
um, all right,
So yeah, I got Sam Darnold. I think I actually am going to make a video about this, but I think the Vikings are going to be a better than what people think team, and I think Darnold can hold down the fort on the Vikings. I think last year the team went 7-10 outside of Kirk Cousins getting hurt. They had a QB carousel, but this team. I feel like I'm talking more team right now, but I just think they can win games, right? He has this is his time to like prove it to where dude just hold down the fort. Like you got Justin Jefferson, you got Aaron Jones, you got freaking Jordan Addison, all this kind of stuff, and it seemed like the league was decently hot on him, and the Vikings. I think he's going to be the day one starter, and you got a young guy like JJ McCarthy who might be in the back scene waiting to get his chance, and it's Darnold's job to lose, right? So with all that being said, still, I'm not going to replace him too high, but I think I'll put him like in the back of Chad Pennington. I think
that's fine.
once again, I think he could. He's another guy to where you could fast forward and be like, wow, Sam Darnold is kind of killing it out of nowhere. He could be that like miracle guy. So not necessarily that I
If
agree with
you
that, but
if you incorporated contract value, I would honestly put him ahead of Russ or Derek Carr at least. Um, I think McCarthy being there is interesting, but another Vikings quarterback who kind of resurged and made the most out of his time there is I think he could be on kind of a Case Keenum trajectory, right?
mm,
Have like a kind of catch lightning in a bottle, right? Do that, he has gotten better. I think his first two franchises were
right,
the
we're
Jets
shit.
were awful,
Yeah,
right? And then
Panthers.
the Jets are so misrun, and the Panthers are. I don't know if I really grasp how big a dumpster fire the Panthers seem to be the last few years.
Yeah,
Um, and so, as far as that goes, I think his ceiling is bottom of almost franchise. Like that. That's as high as he'll ever go for me,
hmm
respectively. But I think he's on that Case Keenum trajectory. Right? They could catch lightning in a bottle. Now the question is, if he makes dumb mistakes, they're just going to say, "Screw it, we're going to start developing McCarthy." Right? So that is
right.
it's. I think he has a shorter leash than I'd probably wish for him. But I think the honest to God truth is they picked him where he did. They picked McCarthy where they did, and I think Darnold's going to have like a 6 to 8 game leash.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. So this is the moment we've all been waiting for. The truth of where you have Trevor
So
Lawrence,
hold
the
up.
Prince.
So before I say anything,
Just know that I'm scissoring you right now as we speak.
so clip it, baby. Clip this. Clip this. Um, Based on what we've talked about in our conversation last year, are you starting to see my point more on Trevor Lawrence before I say anything?
Yeah, last year I never had Trevor Lawrence. I talk about it all the time to where I'm hesitant to start putting players immediately into the top 10. And I've never seen anything from Trevor Lawrence to have him in the top 10. That's how I feel. I've never been where maybe you got down to, but I feel like I've been pretty level with Trevor Lawrence.
He
Like
is.
last year, I
He
probably
is.
had him top 15, 10 to 15 range.
That's fine.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Like,
but
okay, I'll put it this
I'll
way:
say
if
it.
you gave this to me right now, I would place him like maybe below Hertz ish area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. This was the clip last year, right? And I'm going to say it again. Trevor Lawrence is Jameis Winston. They both went to ACC schools, won a national championship on stacked rosters, never quite lived up to that expectation again, right? Turnover prone. Now, Trevor Lawrence is, more fumble prone than interception prone, but he's thrown 17 interceptions before. I think he's, top three in turnovers in his first 3 years. That's not good.
Hmm.
That's not good at all, right? And let's talk about the top 10, 12 guys. Every single one of those guys has at least 1 or 2 games a year where I say, all right, they literally threw the entire team on their back and dragged them across the finish line.
Hmm.
When has Trevor Lawrence done that? Other than the one time he threw 4 interceptions to start a game and then finally decided to turn it
Hmm.
on.
Right.
Name me the game where Trevor Lawrence, you go, that's him. Where we walked away and said, that's him. He's on the up. Name me the one game. You won't.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, to me, is honestly behind Kyler.
Okay. So you have him kind of close to like where I have him then.
I I cannot. I'm tired. Everybody, I hated the narrative because, and I hate the generational quarterback. A generation is 20 years, right? Give or
Oh yeah.
take.
Yeah.
Every 4 years, it's Caleb Williams, it's Andrew Luck, it's Jameis Winston at one point, right? They're like, oh, he's so talented. I'm going to say this. Andrew Luck took the Colts on his back to 11 game wins
Hmm.
year after year.
Right.
Literally, basically broke himself doing it, right? John Elway, Peyton Manning, you know, those are guys that I'm like, okay, generational talents. I I don't see it with Lawrence. I never have. Right? He is Jameis Winston, and he may not throw 30 interceptions, but he might throw 14 interceptions and have 6 fumbles. Is that really that much better? I'd argue that fumbles are worse. At least if you throw an
Yeah.
interception,
Yeah.
it's down the
Throwing
field,
it. Yeah.
someone
It's
can
like a
stop
punt.
him. You fumbled the line, dude. J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald. I know they're out of the league. Someone's taking that thing back.
Hmm.
Okay, and so you were on here about Trevor Lawrence and who was it? Who was the wide receiver? Um, uh,
For the
he signed with the
Jags.
Titans.
Oh yeah.
Calvin
Calvin
Ridley.
Ridley.
You were on the Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley train, and they were fine.
I don't think
They
I
were
was on
fine.
the train, but you can run that
Oh,
podcast
I
back.
yeah. I don't know if it was on the podcast, but either in person or the tweets and TikToks you sent me, man. You want to know why I left the group chat? I left the group chat because of your Calvin Ridley takes. I'm
No,
kidding.
I
Kidding.
just
I
like
did.
to get under your skin. It's not necessarily my opinion. I just like
No, I
to
know, but
right.
but Trevor Lawrence.
I think if you asked me last year, I'd maybe have him at the end of Anthony's Angels, which would once again place him like around QB
Yeah,
13. But I mean, yeah, I agree. I don't know if we 3 years from now, if like he's still the Jaguars quarterback or something like that. Like I
that's
could
it.
see it, and that was another a
In
great
3 years, they in 2 years,
yeah. Well, that I was gonna
if they're
say
not great this year.
that's a great take that you made because I was actually thinking about this before we got on this podcast. Every time we talk about these like NFL draft, these quarterbacks. Even look at this year, we've had 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. How many at the end of the day are we really going to be like, all right, this guy is in that like Anthony Angels type thing, right? Like we can fast
Yeah,
forward and only one of them is up there and everyone else busts, one or two. And Trevor Lawrence is a prime example to where we looked at that class where they had Zach Wilson, they had Trey Lance, they had, Justin Fields, all these guys. And at the end of the day, nobody from that class had panned out. And so that was always my argument with Dak Prescott to where, all these people hate on him all the time, but I'm like, all right, what are we going to do? Where do you want to go here? Right? And maybe
yeah.
that might happen next year to where he's gone, he goes to the Raiders, he goes to the Giants, whatever team, like maybe he's going to get this crazy contract that he probably doesn't deserve. But it's like, all right, what's plan B? Here's a draft next year to where is Shador Sanders QB1? Are we going to get Quinn Ewers, right? It's like, all right, I don't know if any of these guys are going to pan out. So, yeah, I'm with you with that to where, and also with you to where people just say, oh, they're generational. And it's like, all right, I agree.
I'm done with it because we're wrong all the time. I'd say Pat Mahomes is generational.
Yeah.
We had no idea he was coming. Right? We knew he'd be a high pick,
Do
but
you think
no idea.
Caleb Williams is generational?
No, I
Okay.
once
So
again, I think it happens one every 20 years.
so
I
you
think
think
in my
Luck, Andrew Luck, and if
Peyton
Andrew
Manning,
Luck
John Elway,
stayed, okay,
Peyton
and
Manning,
then
John
Mahomes,
Elway, and Luck and Mahomes, but not to the degree where he was the number one pick.
right,
Right?
right,
I'm
right,
talking about guys that come out of
out of the
college that
draft.
I'm like, they're freaking ready. Right? I mean, I'm a Peyton hater, and I can admit that.
Hmm.
I'm a Peyton Manning hater. Right? I take Eli Manning over Peyton all day, mostly to get under people's skin. But there's certain things I didn't love about Peyton's game. Those three guys are like generational talent, right? Caleb Williams it's not there for me, and Pat Mahomes is, but he was allowed to become that, right?
Hmm.
It's not like he was never touted as that, though. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't. None of the guys, but Caleb Williams. Oh, he's generational. We just said that 2 years ago about Trevor Lawrence, and
Hmm.
and I hate when people say, "Oh, it's the team. The Jags are bad." The Bengals were freaking awful,
Hmm.
and Joe Burrow took them. The Chiefs were solid, right? The Colts were one of the worst teams in the league.
Hmm.
Andrew Luck, right? Peyton Manning. That to me is generational. I'm done because just Trevor Lawrence, the hype for him just in the stands for him just greatly upset me.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with you in the fact that like Trevor Lawrence has not lived up to the hype at all that he had coming out of college for sure. I agree. I even at this like I always like joke about my brother because we're in a dynasty football league and I have Fields and he has Trevor Lawrence and so we'd always go back and forth like which one of these guys like would you rather have? And obviously I'm probably on the wrong side at least as of now. But I don't know. Maybe next year we have a different discussion. That's how quarterbacks go. So I got Tua. I've never been high on Tua at all. I mean I got a little bit higher on him, but I think he's okay. He's on the Dolphins, and so I feel like he has a ton of weapons. I actually our first viral video that I posted, which I was kind of wrong on it, but I basically named 10 AFC quarterbacks I'd rather have than Tua because the guy that posted the video said Tua was a top 10 quarterback. And I was like, yo, I'll one up you and I'll name 10 quarterbacks in the AFC that I'd rather have. And that like blew up. And like I started finding all these like Tua like
All
lovers.
right.
And I don't know.
Where are you putting him?
So
Where are you putting him?
I'm gonna put Tua behind Jordan Love.
Okay. I look, the first from Caleb Williams to uh Jaden Daniels, I think there's a lot of like you can move a lot of those guys within that
Mm-hmm.
bucket of players. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Two is another guy. He's a 48 to 52, maybe even $44 million guy as far as what you pay him. He's got Waddle and Tyreek Hill and OBJ and all these guys like they're going to run it up on some teams. But what are they going to do if they have to play in Pittsburgh in the winter?
Yeah.
Or sorry, not
Well,
Pittsburgh,
we
Baltimore.
already did see that. We saw him play the Chiefs in the winter, and nothing.
He might be a guy that needs to figure out the gloves in the winter. Just and I know it's tough, right? And I like Tua. I want to really like stand up for him right now, but I think he's not a top 10 quarterback. I think he's somewhere between 12 and 18. Does that make sense? I think there could be years where you're like, you know what? He was the 14th best quarterback this year. He really had it. And then there's years where he's like, not quite, right? But I don't know that he's and this is kind of where I start to wonder if you have Kirk too high. I don't necessarily feel like Kirk and Tua are super far apart, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
There's a projection level.
I trust Kirk more in a playoff scenario, which might be
That's
like
fair.
controversial. But I do feel like Kirk Cousins, whenever he plays those like primetime games, he's always playing against very like talented teams, and I just feel
But
like
who are you going
Kirk.
to play in the but who are you going to play in the playoffs? Talented teams.
Right, right, for sure. I think it comes down to like more of the arm talent type thing, and I think I trust Kirk Cousins like deep ball and in a bad weather situation more than I trust a Tua.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair. I don't think Kirk's
like
leaving
I
too many
agree. I agree
shorts,
with
and
what you're saying. I don't think like the drop off is like insane, but
I I think Kirk might be the one that I disagree with the most right now on the list. I know I've had some opinions, but Kirk's every time I see him there and the guys below him on the next level, I'm like, he's really not that much better than some of these guys.
yeah,
I've got Will Levis. I'm gonna I'm gonna put him ahead of Jacoby Brissett.
okay,
I think he's Jake Locker all over again. I don't think he's gonna put it together. I the team struggled last year. There was a lot of changes. I don't think it was fair what they did to Ryan Tannehill, and I'm not a fan necessarily of Ryan Tannehill at all times. Um, this I will say this is the one where I have the most potential to be wrong, right? But he's last chance standpoint of the Titans weren't in position to draft anybody this year. He was the number two pick, sorry, a second round pick or something last
yeah,
year,
like
right?
early second
But
round. Yeah,
you're in a division with the Colts and the Texans. And I don't love Trevor Lawrence, but I think Trevor Lawrence is better than Will Levis,
uh
right?
huh, yeah.
Are the Titans going to be comfortable with the fourth best quarterback in their division if they're drafting in the top 12 next year?
Yeah, for potentially like years to come as well. Like
It,
I
yeah,
you could make a debate that the other three quarterbacks might be franchise guys. Even though like what you think about Trevor Lawrence, but these are like 25 or younger guys that could be on that team for the next 10 years. And yeah, I agree.
and let me clarify. Trevor Lawrence, if you gave Trevor Lawrence the Daniel Jones contract or the Geno Smith contract, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think he's capable of, as long as he's not taking up 25% of the cap, I think that's fair. I don't want to say that I think Trevor Lawrence is a bad quarterback. I just don't think he's as good as people made him out to me to be.
Which I
I
think
think he is,
people might think he's like Stroud level. So, yeah, I think you're right.
and that's so wrong,
Right.
right? Like it's so horrifically wrong. And I admit that Levis is the one that I think I have the most potential to be just dead ass wrong, but um, him and you know him and Aiden O'Connell really are in kind of similar positions as far as if they don't win it out this year, their teams are moving on, right? Both of their teams probably might have drafted a quarterback this year. They weren't in position.
Yeah, I mean the Titans might be the worst team in the NFL next year, and like you were saying, if there's this guy out of nowhere in college that just breaks out and he's in their laps, why hold on to a second round draft pick
Hold
and
on,
Will
hold
Levis?
on. Forget out of nowhere. Think the logistics here. I love talking about contracts and the cap because it actually is such an intriguing part of how teams make decisions.
Right.
He was a second round pick, meaning he only has 4 years on his deal and can negotiate after his third.
Hmm.
They don't have to be at the very top to get a Shedder Sanders. What if they're in the top 12 and Quinn Ewers or somebody's there, right? And the coach is like, I didn't draft Will Levis, right? Do they go and get a guy that fits their scheme as far as, because that's kind of like the last pull that the GMs and the last lever that the coaches and GM pull, right? That's not my quarterback. Let me go get my quarterback.
Hmm.
And that unfortunately is what could happen to Levis, but I didn't like him coming out either. I think he's got this weird, he's not as bad as Tim Tebow, but he's got this weird like hitch motion and he's jacked, right? And he's an athlete, but I just don't see it. Will Levis is definitely one of those guys where I say um, he looks like an athlete. He doesn't play like a quarterback though. Like his
Yeah,
fundamentals
yeah,
are. I don't think I've cussed yet. I'll say this: Will Levis's fundamentals are dog shit.
Miles made a point about him last year because there are a lot of people that even up to the draft that said he was going to be the number two pick. They were saying that he was going to go to the Texans, and Miles, his point about Will Levis was similar to yours with Jaden Daniels, even though like the talent is not the same. But what he kind of
Yep.
did say is he said, "All right, here's a guy that went to Kentucky and had the opportunity to kind of carry the team. Go back to any of those games, and you never were like, all right, this was the game where Will
Oh,
Levis just popped off." And I mean, you could say that like that's Daniel Jonesy, to where this is a guy that people just were like making stuff up about him, and he got all this hype for no reason, right? And he also doesn't
yeah,
have that. He doesn't have the like. He might not fit the hangout type vibe. Sure, he seems kind of like
I,
the partier cool guy or whatever. But
he seems like he has to be the center of attention,
I was gonna say he
in
could be
a
more of like a
way.
douchebag type kind of thing.
He might be the me of the group. You know
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
He might be the me of the group. Let's, I'll fall on the sword for that one. I know who I am, but I just, it's kind of like Daniel Jones, right? He's the fourth best quarterback in the division now, right? At least on potential. I know Jane Daniels is new, but no team's going to stand pat for that, right? And that's just the fact. I'm curious to see what you do with the next guy because I'm very conflicted on how I feel about him,
yeah.
but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So JJ McCarthy, I think it's fine where the Vikings ended up drafting him. I mean, they were in a position to where they kind of had to get a quarterback. I was very confused when they got rid of Kirk Cousins because to me I talked about it earlier in the video, right? To where the Vikings were a team that they seem kind of win now ish. I mean, you got a wide receiver one, you got Jordan Addison, like that duo of receivers could be one of the top. And then you add in Hawkinson too, with that trio of guys. And so I feel like him being placed into the Vikings, I think, is a very good setup for him. But he doesn't have a high ceiling. I feel like JJ McCarthy has a high floor. He to me kind of fits the Pennington mold, and so I kind of have him in that Pennington area. I have him over Bo Nix for now.
Yep.
Even though it's kind of wrong because I trust Darnold day one more than I do McCarthy, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, right, I have to give him that upside to where maybe 2 years from now he's Purdy, right? He's Brock Purdy, and you really wanted a guy like JJ McCarthy, and so yeah, I have him in the Pennington for now.
I think McCarthy is, as far as like historical quarterbacks or someone that fits. I think his ceiling is the last 5 or 6 years of Drew Brees, right? That's his ceiling, right? He's mobile. He can move around and make the play. Um, I don't know if you knew the story, but it came out allegedly, or I'm pretty sure it's verified now. The Vikings told Kirk Cousins, "We don't want to let you go." Right? The contract I think was comparable to what they were offering in Atlanta.
Yeah, they
We're
gave him an
probably
extra
going to
year.
draft, but they were going to draft. But they said we're willing to. If the right quarterback falls to us, we're going to draft. That the Atlanta Falcons never indicated to him. So
Yeah,
I don't think they let Kirk go so much as Kirk left because he thought he could secure the bag and all these things. But um, I think you have him generally in the right place. But he is a guy, kind of like Josh Allen, that I think could surprise some people. Not as far as how talented he is, but as far as how successful he is.
right, right.
I'll say this: I think two quarterbacks that I see as very different are this. Everybody wants to get on, oh, Michigan was stacked and all this stuff. Well, they never won a national championship without him, right?
Hmm.
Like he was the missing piece in a lot of ways, right? They had the Blake Gordons and all these guys. Two guys that I think are compared in the wrong way are Stetson Bennett and JJ McCarthy. Stetson Bennett is what was he, 25 or something when he was drafted? Maybe didn't have his degree. Like, yeah, he's a football head, but there wasn't untapped potential there, right?
Right,
What we saw at Stetson Bennett, I think there's untapped potential with JJ McCarthy.
right. And he's younger, which is also potential. But yeah,
He is. Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, right? Because, with Knicks, he's 24. Trevor Lawrence isn't even that old, or maybe just turned 25, somewhere around that range. But I think JJ McCarthy is going to be the one where he could be god awful, right? But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Kevin. I think part of the reason Kevin O'Connell took him is that he saw what happened to Shanahan. He saw what happened to other guys. I think he pushed to say he really wanted his guy for the future,
Hmm.
um, and kind of to insulate himself before Kirk, went sideways. And they don't know what's going to happen with the injury. I've got Minshew, and I don't want to linger on this one. I think he's slightly ahead of Darnold. He's proven more to me than
Hmm.
Darnold has as
Yeah,
far as
yeah,
consistency. Um, but I don't think he's better or worse than Derek Carr, right? I think maybe he's a little more gutsy or whatever you call it.
yeah, yeah.
But I
I like
think
him
the
there.
Raiders did not draft. I think the Raiders did not draft a quarterback this year because they were not in position to. And when they got to second, third, fourth, fifth round, I think they basically said, "Let's see what really." I think they're going to let Minshew start and hope that Aiden O'Connell develops, right? And if that doesn't happen, they're drafting a quarterback next year. I think that's the truth of it.
Yeah. So I got Drake May. I feel like I'm kind of lower on him than most. I know you kind of mentioned his name
Okay.
earlier. I I I I give him like Josh Allen light, like light Josh Allen. I just feel when he
I
play
think
everyone always compares Drake May to Herbert. And I think it's because they're built the same way, but he plays so much like Josh Allen. He'll like be running to the left side, put it in his left hand, and just like chunk it up. And like the way that he plays football to me, I don't like the guys that are just throwing multiple interceptions like all the time. And he kind of gives me that. Um,
well, I'm sorry, like Trevor Lawrence.
right. I mean, yeah, maybe.
Oh wow.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
So, ah,
Huh.
man, this is so tough because it's like, yeah, he has potential, but like, yeah. Uh,
I'll say his. I don't like the Josh Allen comp. I actually think he's not as far as how tremendous of a runner he was, but he's got some of the mechanics issues and recklessness of Cam Newton,
mhm.
right? Now, Cam Newton's awesome, right? One of my all-time favorite college quarterbacks, and I think if he was on a different team other than Panthers, he would have been more successful. But bad Cam, right? Like throwing off the back foot, throwing in it. I think where are you going to put him in, and I'll see. I'll respond after
I'm
that.
thinking very hard. I think I'm just gonna do this.
I so you're doing that based on his upside, right?
Yeah, right.
That's why. Okay, so um, what's tough about this is with the Patriots and projecting him out is they didn't bring back Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien or anything like that, right? We have no idea what they expect him to be, and I don't think he's a finished product,
Oh
right?
no, he's super
So
raw.
that
He's yeah, he's got a lot to work on.
he is about as raw, honestly, maybe slightly more from a passing thing, but I'll be honest, I like Anthony Richards' fundamentals better than I like.
Oh yeah,
Have you seen Andy Richard throw a ball? Yes, he's like moving around because he's a mobile quarterback, but when he throws it, like it's not like a tight dime like Matthew Stafford spiral, but Anthony Richardson throws a pretty ball, right?
right.
Um, May just kind of like ducks it in there. I'm trying to think of a guy. I think his ceiling is, and I don't think he reaches this necessarily, but he's got the potential to be um, Jared Goff, like a more mobile Jared Goff. But his floor, man, is Blaine Gabbert or
Yeah,
Blake Bortles.
yeah, I think those are probably pretty good comps.
And that's if he does really well, like he could be
Where
like a
would you have placed
mobile.
him? Would you have put him in Chad Pennington?
I think you have him right. Now I'll say this: when we come back next year, both Nix and McCarthy could be ahead of him.
Oh yeah, easily. I think when we look at all six of these quarterbacks outside of maybe Caleb, I think anything could happen. We could be like completely. Once again, you got to go back to that like 2021 NFL draft with the Lawrence, the Fields, Zach Wilson isn't even on here. Mac Jones isn't on here.
Yeah.
Like these guys don't even belong, or like they can't even get on the tier list, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean we can fast forward and like these guys are just completely out of the league, and that's why they're so difficult to rank. Is because you kind of want to have that belief in the upside kind of thing, but yeah, you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, and you have to believe it, and let's talk about that, right? Like you talk about upside. Penix. Penix actually might, besides Caleb Williams, might have one of the higher upsides if he stays healthy. And my comp for him is if you even look at his throwing motion, like clip this, he might be Phillip Rivers,
Mm-hmm.
right? He might be Phillip Rivers in a mirror because he's left-handed, but I think he's better than Tua, right? As far as look at what he did at Washington. Everybody's on Bo Nix's. They were just riding Bo Nix and McCarthy. Yeah, they all had talented, right? Oregon had receivers. Michigan had running backs and receivers. Who got to the national championship game? Who beat Texas? He got beat up by the Texas O-line and still won. I think Penix is ahead of Tua. That's where I put him.
Okay, that's fine.
And to this, I say, actually, I'm
So you think that Penix?
I'm going to move him ahead. I'm going to move him ahead of Love because I don't think he's going to be as volatile as Jordan Love.
Okay,
I think
right.
Penix,
He's more consistent. Well, Penix. When I think about Anthony, when I think about you, I feel like Penix plays football like exactly how you want him to play. Like you would love his like style. He's like incredibly accurate, like easily the most accurate quarterback of all of these guys. And the only thing that kind of haunts him is the injury, the age, and like.
But he's been healthy the last 2 years, right? He got beat up in the playoffs, still played. I'll say this. He is more accurate. He is more actually accurate than Bo Nix, right? If you talk about timing, right? Indiana was trash without him, right? And he was pretty solid at Indiana before he got injured and had to transfer. He is, he lived up to his potential. Yes, he had extra COVID years and all those things, but that's why he's to me in the conversation for Heisman. Like I know he didn't play in the SEC and he didn't have the flashy runs, right? But in a lot of ways, now his floor is RG3 from the standpoint of electric talent that just gets hurt, right? Or just can't make it work after an injury. But I'll say this. I think in some ways that injury might have helped him because it forced him to become something he wasn't comfortable being. And I think that's going to be better for him long term. Someone that passes first but can run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually wondering if you go back in time, in hindsight, in 15 years from now, do we look back and is he saying, "Hey, man, it really forced me to boil it down to mechanics and being a really good quarterback." And like, I'm weirdly high on Penix. The tough part
I
is
don't think
the whole
I don't think
Falcons
you're
situation.
like I don't think you're like weirdly high on him. I mean, there are 3 teams in the NFL draft that all stated that they wanted to trade up to the top 10. But yeah, I agree. Yeah. Funny conversation is that in our dynasty league in fantasy, I traded up for Penix to get Penix as well because I wanted to have him on the team because I believe in him as an NFL quarterback. And so, I mean, there are 3 teams out there that all wanted to trade up into the top 10 to draft Penix, right? Like he's the perfect. I mean, he could be CJ Stroud if you think about it, or like he kind of plays a similar way to where he's more of a pocket guy now. He's got a great arm and he's got the accuracy is insane. I mean, it's similar to what Stroud has.
Well, but he's got the accuracy, and unlike Tua, he's got the deep ball.
Right.
And unlike Jaden, he showed up in big games, right? What's the flip? What's the difference for me with Jaden? Maybe it might have been 2 touchdowns in 180 yards or 2 something, right? He showed up in big games, and I think that matters, right? That has to matter. as
Yeah,
far as a quarterback
I
goes.
liked
And
your I liked your comparison to where we're talking about JJ McCarthy, we talk about Jaden Daniels in the aspect that all of these guys had teams around him, and the Washington ended up making it to the national championship because that's always everyone's like knock on Penix. Oh, we had two crazy receivers, but like so did Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels had two guys go in the first round in the NFL draft. And everyone's always like,
I
oh, they had Polk, he had this. And then Michigan, they had, how many Michigan guys got drafted? Like 15 guys, like 12 guys
and you
all
got
got
Will, yeah,
drafted.
and they were up there with Georgia as far as just insanely talented teams, right?
Right.
Just like truly. And so I think that's the big piece, and it's why I like Penix. I don't know what's going to happen with this. To draw a Philip Rivers comparison, could the Philip Rivers and Drew Brees scenario happen with Kirk Cousins and Penix? Right, where
Yeah.
at the end of the day they're like, "Hey, Drew, thanks." And I'm not saying Kirk Cousins doesn't have a future, in the immediate future as far as like the next couple of years, but or Alex Smith and I'm not saying Michael Penix is
Right.
Pat Mahomes, but Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes were Kirk Cousins is like, okay, he goes to the Raiders next year. He goes to the,
Right.
some team, right? And so that's an interesting one.
As
But
as
yeah,
an
so that
as an NFL fan, I think everyone kind of sighed when Penix got drafted to the Falcons because we all want to have all of the most talented quarterbacks be playing in the NFL. And for me, it's
yeah,
hard to sit there watching Gardner Minshew, Derek Carr, these kind of guys win, or even like a Geno Smith type guy win guys like Penix that are more talented, that are more accurate than them. He has to be a backup because the Falcons drafted him, right? So I
I
think,
I I I there's a where I think Penix could have been the number two quarterback off the board.
well, yeah, you're saying it with this. You're saying that he's the second
I
best,
think there's yeah.
which I don't think you're crazy
Um
because you're not too far off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So
you have.
I know I got Justin Fields. I'm really sorry. I don't want. I'd be all right like giving him to you because I don't know if I'm like that crazy. I might do okay. I
So
don't
let's see
know.
what happens. Let's see what
Okay.
happens before
So
I
all
throw a
right.
fit.
Yeah. All right. So I am the number
Watch this
one.
be watch me just end the live stream on this. Let me just like
I'm the biggest Justin Fields supporter of all time. I think over the past 3 years, he has had one of the worst teams to play for. Darnell Mooney was his wide receiver one. Now Caleb gets to transport into the Bears, and he has the greatest situation that a first round or number one pick ever had. He's got three guys that Justin Fields would have just loved to have on his team that he never had the opportunity to have. Once again, Darnell Mooney's like the fifth option on the Falcons. And meanwhile, Caleb Williams has a Dunze. He's got DJ Moore now and freaking Keenan Allen on his team. And yeah, so Justin Fields got the shit of the bed when it comes to the Bears team. And even Eberflus being a head coach and his OC was not great either. So I still believe in the potential that Fields has. I'm going to put him over I'm going to put him over Bryce Young. That's how I'd fairly place him
I'd
in
put
Alex's
him
biased eyes.
I'd put him ahead of Geno Smith.
Okay. So I don't think it's like crazy far.
No, because the end of the almost franchise is really gnarly, right? Like
Oh,
Bryce
yeah.
Young, Drake May, like that. I, I don't. So I want to first stop the slander on Justin Fields from the standpoint of that story that came out this week where like the locker room was toxic.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Justin
I
Fields
don't
is
believe
bad. It
that.
was
I don't believe that for all or for anything.
no,
So,
I think that was a coordinator or like a QB coach who like lost his job and is pissed at Justin Fields, right?
yeah.
I don't believe that. I do believe that his eyes are bad, right? He stares the guys down. I think he is sloppy as far as footwork, right? Like his feet are getting tied. Like sometimes when it's a three-step drop. I don't know what it is, and he hasn't. He's on that list of guys where he doesn't get better, right? I know. Fine, his coaching is bad, his roster is bad. but he never comes back in the 3 years. And I'm like, he's better at what he was than what he was, right? In some ways, like I think he's the same. I don't think he's necessarily regressed, but that's my rub on Justin Fields. I'm all with the talent and potential and all that. He hasn't gotten better. I don't think he's far off from Trey Lance in some ways, and that is my honest to God opinion.
Okay. I disagree with your better take. I think I mean year one I feel like you kind of have to remove that situation. I mean he was
It's
never
fine.
ready. I think year two obviously he wasn't the best when it comes to a passer, and he also didn't have any weapons. Right, I talk about this all the time. The Bears had the worst receiving core in the NFL 2 years ago, and then they had the worst offensive line 2 years ago. And sure, they made some additions, right? Like last year, they gave him DJ Moore, and DJ Moore got like 1,500 receiving yards last season. Like he was an incredible receiver. There were a couple games to where Fields had I think it was against the Broncos, who were deemed one of the better defenses, and another team.
Solid. Yeah.
And he threw like 350 passing yards and had 4 touchdowns back to back games. And he had great. I think it really just came down to the defense wasn't as great. They ended up obviously trading for Montez Sweat, who came in and kind of changed the defense overall. Like I said, the DJ Moore addition was great for him. The O line got better, but it wasn't like great, right? But I think you put Justin Fields on this Bears team, and they're going to make the playoffs. And so we would be having if Caleb Williams didn't
Oh,
exist, no.
I don't know, man. I maybe on the fringe, but my issue with is
I
I'm
think
not. He
I
got
think
increment.
okay,
Uh,
okay. I'll ask you this: a year ago, they went 7-10, right? And 3 of those games, they completely their defense completely got shattered. They were beating the Lions by
yeah.
like 14, 17 points. The Broncos game, the game that I was talking about, Fields had 350 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and they were up by like 3 touchdowns. And the team, there was like a stat that came up, and I think they had like a 90% or higher to win 3 games, and they all choked. And I'm not saying that he's not part of that, but he also put him in position to be winning that game, right? So what I'm trying to
I,
say is
I,
they were a coin flip away from being 10-7. And now you add in Keenan Allen, you add in Adunze, who at that point could have been Marvin Harrison. We put Marvin Harrison on that team, and then this Bears defense is nothing to play with. I think even for Caleb
I
Williams, they're going to be in the playoffs this year.
I don't think they're quite that close. I think there are now it depends on how the NFC rolls out, right? But
Right.
the NFC, the cool thing about the NFL as far as parity, it's not like baseball or um, basketball. Most teams are generally in the middle, right? Um, is 10-7 going to be good enough to get to the playoffs? That's my question.
Hmm.
That's my thing, and I don't love Jordan Love, but the Packers are a good football team,
Oh yeah. I mean,
and
I think the Bears and
the
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 Packers are
Vikings are
comparable.
and the Vikings are going to be healthier, right? So I don't know. Like if you're fighting to be the second best in your team, I don't think that you're definitely going to make the playoffs. And um, I his fundamentals are bad. I don't think his fundamentals are going to be better with Arthur Smith or Russell Wilson trying to teach him anything. Um, uh, Actually, the best place for him to be would have been honestly land somewhere like what's it called, the 49ers, right, where there's no debate really. um, I think the Steelers are going to be a real mess this year potentially.
I think
I think it's going to
I
be a real
disagree. I think the
mess.
Steelers can be still good. I think
I, I
they've gotten better at the offensive line. Their receivers are the one question mark that they have. Like it's Pickens and nobody, and even Pickens has question marks. But I mean, their defense is still solid.
so hold on. So the part that you wish that the Bears would have given Fields, the Steelers are weak at, and you think they're not going to be a dumpster fire? They're not as good
I
at the
mean,
Browns and they're not as good at the
The
Ravens.
Steelers
They're the fourth
are
best team in that division.
the Steelers. No, but even the Steelers being the fourth best team in the division now are miles better than what the Bears were like or 2 years ago for Fields
Correct.
year two.
I
They made the playoffs last year, and Mason Rudolph was the quarterback.
I I yeah. I I can't.
I think you put that Steelers
I
team in like any other division that they're like touted pretty, at least like above average. If Fields is the quarterback, I don't know about Russell Wilson, but
I think Justin Fields is my comp for him is Jason Campbell.
okay.
Like he's Jason Campbell through. Remember with the Raiders, right? He was okay with the
Hmm.
now the Commanders, right? But Jason Campbell was leading the Raiders to potentially the playoffs before he broke his collarbone and they had to go get Carson Palmer, right?
Hmm.
I get that. I just don't think the reason I have him lower
I'll ask you
isn't
this:
necessarily.
will Fields be a starting quarterback next year, 2025?
No.
Okay, so you
think
think after this year the Steelers blow it up, Fields is gone, Russell Wilson's gone, and they're gonna draft
yeah,
a guy.
I think last year they were blowing out. The last 2 years they've been bleeding out some bad contracts, right? Some of the guys let go and Ben Roethlisberger retiring, right? I think that's the honest to God truth. They're restructuring things, right? I think it's similar to Will Levis in this. If they don't make the playoffs or they skate by, right? Let's say they skate by and they're on the fringe of the discussion, but you look around and you go, well, damn, Lamar Jackson, dog. Joe Burrow, dog, right? Browns don't necessarily have a dog, but they're a good team, right? Are they good having the third or fourth best quarterback in that division, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he's a starter. And if he is, it's like a Sam Darnold going to Minnesota, not a,
The re-
Baker Mayfield.
the reason
I
why
don't think he's going to, yeah.
the reason why I ask is because like this year I think was like a outlier to where there are 6 quarterbacks drafted in the top 12, and next year the quarterback draft is super weak. Right? There's not maybe a Carson Beck, a Ewers, Shador Sanders, who I don't even know if anyone's hot on any of these guys. Right? And so next year there's going to be a lot more quarterback positions opening. And I think there are going to be teams that might be like trying to bite for a guy like Fields. And I think the Steelers might be his future. Like I think he might stay there. But like let's look at our list that we have here, right? We have a Stafford that he could be gone soon. Rodgers, he could be out. We could look at maybe a Tua, right? Or a Deshaun Watson, or a Geno, who he could be gone. Derek Carr, Gardner Minshew. Like I feel like there's going to be a lot of openings and there's not a lot to fill. And so that's why I think that Fields might be still a franchise quarterback, right? And I know
Okay, but
I'm coming from a biased standpoint. I understand that. But
I think the issue is that I don't think all those teams. So Aaron Rodgers, I'm a fan of Jordan Travis. I just wish he would have been drafted somewhere else.
mhm.
Even if he leaves, they're going to have to bleed off some bad contracts. Matt Stafford, same thing, right? They're still cleaning up cap issues. I didn't. If Justin Fields is a starter next year, I think it's in a Sam Darnold capacity.
Yeah, I think that's like that's a fine take. I think that's why I just had
That's
to ask
fine.
you, like, if he's a
But
starting
then
quarterback.
that's why he's not in the almost franchise for me because he's not. I don't think he's almost at the point where someone's going to give him $50 million a year. I
Right.
don't think he's close to that right now.
Yeah.
And so that's why all the guys in that bucket, I can argue Trevor Lawrence should make 44 or $48 million a year, right? I think Justin Fields is a 35 to $42 million guy, right? Like, um, I, I think
Okay. I mean, that's fine. I'll move him down. I'll put him.
No. Hold up. Leave him where you had him, man. Like, let's.
Well,
This is
we're gonna
so much
start
fun,
going
right?
over it eventually, at least if you want to.
Uh, no, yeah, let's do it. And then Sam Howell, I put him ahead of Gardner. Of Let me just put him ahead of Sam Darnold.
Okay,
Um, I actually like what he did last
I
year.
want to put him the same way,
Um,
same spot.
as bad as the Bears were in some years, I think the Commanders were equally as bad in some ways, right?
Hmm.
Dan Snyder leaving, the whole thing. That whole thing they did with the quarterbacks that taking them to Top Golf or whatever was bizarre. That was an odd scenario. Um, I think Sam Howell has his trajectory as Chase Daniel.
Okay.
That's where I think he is pushing, right? But that's kind of where I have him. But that is that concludes it, right? Unless I wanted to, unless we really want to, dig in the gutters here. But I think Ryan Tannehill is fairly honestly better some of the guys on this board. I think Joe Flacco has some run on him, but these are the guys that we think are going to be, making names or trying to make names from this or themselves this year.
Hmm.
If we're going to go over it, the one that I have the toughest one on is Josh Allen and Justin Herbert because I rank them pretty evenly.
Okay. I'm fine. I'm fine with. We could go over it for
I'm good
like
with that.
3 minutes or five or whatever.
Yeah, let's talk about guys that are coming up that aren't on this board. I'm happy with this, man. We've talked about it enough. I think you know Spencer Rattler. He might get some play, but I don't think he's going to work out. Jordan Travis is high on him as I was. That broken leg and some of the stuff I saw through the draft process. My hopes aren't as high as they were coming into the year. In the next year, Shadur Sanders has some upside, but you're a UT guy. How bad does it hurt how bad does it hurt Quinn Ewers' stock if if he gets benched this year for Arch?
I've never been on Ewer's
No,
bandwagon.
no. But
Yeah.
all the
Oh
mock
yeah.
drafts for
Right. Right.
2025,
Oh no. I
they're saying
view
he's a top.
I view Ewers as like a third or second or third round pick, and he won't.
Is he?
He's gonna be a first, just inevitably because the way that quarterbacks get drafted. That's why
And
I
I
that's
view yours.
that's why I had to ask you for next year when there's going to be more quarterback or less quarterbacks than teams because I don't see a lot of these guys like jumping up the
But
draft
there's
board.
but the part of it that I can't. But part of it is quarterbacks are going to be on the move, right? Dak could go take someone's
Yeah, yeah.
job, and they could give Trey Lance a run, right? Kirk could be traded. Like there's
Hmm.
moves that could happen that. But I'm not. I think Quinn Ewers is remarkably like Spencer Rattler, right? He just happened to be on better teams.
Yeah.
But there's a world where he gets benched. Shadur, I think
Oh yeah. I would
Carson
rather Arch Manning be starting this year right now. I think Manning's better than him.
Carson Beck is oddly like Joe Flacco to me. I know that's a weird comp. Carson Beck is weirdly
Some
like
people have
Joe
him as
Flacco
QB
to
one
me.
right now.
Um, I think the guys who have him as QB1 are going to be guys that want to run like your prototypical heavy set offenses, right?
Hmm.
I can't name another guy, right? Like, the kid in Miami, Ward, right? That's really interesting, but
Yeah.
he's short and not, I'm not tall, but for a quarterback, he's short and he's not
Hmm.
exactly Kyler Murray. Um, Unlike this year, I don't have a name that I'm like, oh, watch out for this guy. Coming up hot. What's nice is I think next year is the last year of the COVID quarterbacks, right? You're not going to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
these
Right.
Michael Penix and Bo Nixes that run it out anymore. But yeah, man,
6 years.
thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on today, dude. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. We definitely went in depth for sure. I'll probably move a couple guys just to make it more. Yeah, I'll probably put Kirk.
Burke goes down, and can I sell you on? Can I sell you on something?
Yeah, I'll move
Can,
Fields because I definitely am biased. That's why I wanted you to do him. Okay.
can we move in the same order, but can we move Herbert and Allen in front of Stroud? I think the
Oh,
top three
oh,
guys, true.
yeah.
I think the top three guys and Burrow has to stay healthy. Let me say that. But the top three guys, I think it's really hard to debate that they're not the three guys. The Justin Herbert and the Josh Allen playoff success, I think, is a real question. And I think it's, a question of like how consistent can they be and all that stuff. I think they're franchise quarterbacks, right? They're at the top of the Angels. But to your point, Joe Burrow is one of the only guys. I'd say Lamar Jackson too, just because he's a disaster to try and fucking plan for.
Oh, yeah.
But I think those three guys are. If I had to roll a die, a three-sided die, and pick a quarterback, I hope it's one of those three.
Yeah.
After that, if you told me Pat Mahomes or Tom Brady's on the other side, give me one of those three guys. I'm not so sure about everybody else.
Yeah. I think I kind of agree with that. I'm slightly
Cool.
hotter on Herbert, but I mean, I can see the world.
But he's not demonstrably better than Allen, and I don't think Allen's a him anymore, right? Like I'm curious to see what happens, right? So it's a um, I feel good about this because there's kind of that you know triangle shape as far as like the dispersions of quarterbacks. Like your top is clearly the top, and your bottom's clearly the bottom,
I
and
like how
you got a lot of
our top two rows are top 10 also.
I.
I think
So
if I were to
that's
make a top 10, I probably would put these guys in the top 10, I think. Yeah.
comfortably right, and there's some rotation that could happen, but
Yeah.
um, I I the reason I did it is those three guys I think are the class of the NFL right now. Right? I think Justin Herbert's great. I don't know that I'd say he's the class of the NFL, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, right,
and
right.
it sucks because he's in, but and so to me, this is a solid list.
Yeah. I agree. I like it. I think we did pretty good. Obviously, you
All
could
right, so are you going to have?
shuffle around.
Oh, go ahead.
One. No, I was just gonna say you could obviously shuffle around guys like three left, three right, whatever. But like, I think I'm pretty happy with like how it
I think people
panned
in the
out.
right categories. There,
Yeah,
people are in the right categories, but so I want to get it on tape. Can I get on sooner than the next year, man? Can I come on
yeah.
the pod more often? This is
No,
a lot of fun, man.
I was gonna say we should do those like quizzes that I sent over to you to where we could like do stuff like that or just different
Yeah,
stuff like whatever you. I feel like it'd be better, and I feel like you already kind of do this, but you'd be like, all right, let's record Wednesday next week, and
yeah,
or maybe we like make it try to put like a calendar, thing to where it's like, all
yeah.
right, every other Wednesday we'll like do something. But yeah, I think it would be good to like get clips and stuff, and so I'm down.
All
Yeah,
I
just
am,
straight
man.
up.
So all the people out there, this is all I am. I'm not a friend. All I am is clickbait. Okay,
No,
all I am is clicks to him. He's monetized. He's just trying to monetize my friendship.
exactly. And
All right,
I
guys.
think we did good about saving it for the pod. Like we definitely went in. So all right,
That could
everyone.
be a cool. That'd
Oh, a
be a cool
shirt.
name for like a segment.
Yeah, yeah.
No, cool name for a
Oh yeah,
segment.
I agree.
Save it
I
for the
agree.
pod.
Yeah, yeah.
All
That's
right,
good. That's good.
take it
All right,
easy, man.
guys. See ya. Appreciate it. See y'all next time.